Welcome to the Pow Wow with Mayra, where each week we bring you an inspiring person and their stories to help us discover different ways to see life and its challenges. My focus sits on being thoughtful, engaging, and entertaining. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching. Well, welcome.
Glad to be here.
I am so excited to talk to you today. I've been looking forward to it because it's always so enjoyable to talk to you.
Oh, well, I appreciate you giving me the time.
I think like you're so full of wisdom, and I can't wait to hear that from you. And so I want to get started by getting to know Senior Alvarez. Where did you grow up? How did you grow up? And maybe a little bit about your childhood.
Okay. Um, Grew up in Saginaw, Michigan, born and raised there. Uh, my parents are originally from the College Station area, Bryan, Texas, and they moved there in the 50s. And my dad worked at General Motors, um, gave us a good, uh, healthy upbringing, you know. So, childhood, my dad liked to wrench on cars, so he wanted. I have three older brothers, and they all know how to work on cars, but me. So I know a little bit, but my thing was sports. I wanted to play sports. I wanted to be a kid, and uh, I give my dad a lot of um, praise for letting me be a kid because their childhood wasn't a childhood. Their childhood was working in the fields. You know, you're old enough, you're gonna go pick cotton, pick vegetables, whatever. And my dad got tired of that kind of life, so he moved to Michigan. He wanted a different type of life. But anyway, yeah, my dad would be wrenching on a truck or something. Hey, come here, mijo. Let's come here. I want to show you what to do. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go play basketball. I'm gonna play baseball. So, all right, you're gonna want to learn how to do this someday. So, yeah, it kind of caught up with me, but he let me be a kid. I'm grateful for that. So,
What were your favorite sports?
baseball, basketball, played a little football, but as you get older, you don't grow. So, certain sports you can't play. So, but no, I grew up in a small, over there, they're called townships, not cities.
Okay.
So we had, they had the city, but we grew up in a township. So it was a smaller uh, community. So very quiet.
Did you have many friends?
Yeah, when I was growing up, kids couldn't wait to get a bike. That was your freedom back then, And my dad would like, got to get your grades up. You got to get all A's or whatever. Show him my report card. Dad, you said you'd get me a bike. So the place he would go get his auto parts was called Daters. Where right next to it was called um, J&R's. It was a bike shop. So when he would go get his car parts, I would go next door and look at the bikes. And I finally cornered him and I said, Dad, 2 years now I've been getting my grades up and, I want to get my bike. So sure enough, he bought it. I would wax that thing. They had chrome wheels and wash it. It was like a car for me. But as soon as I got that, I could ride with my friends, go play ball wherever they were. So, yeah.
It gave you faster wheels.
Yeah. So
than your feet.
Yeah. Had the curfew. Our curfew back then is street lights come on, you got to come home. So back then you didn't have cell phones. So yeah, that was our cue. Lights started coming on.
What about in the winter when even in the winter when
Winter,
when the sun sets like at 5 p.m.?
Yeah, it's back then you played winter sports. I didn't play hockey, but we ice skated, so stuff like that. But the thing about my parents, they're old school. So when you got old enough, you had to work. And we got a paper route. My brother had it. And when he got old enough, he got a job at Burger King, so handed the paper out to me. And my dad would help us. We had a station wagon, and he would put the tailgate down, put the newspapers on there. And Michigan, you're talking waist deep, you know.
Mhm.
And he
Mhm.
says, your customers want to read their paper first thing in the morning, like 7 in the morning. We would get up at 5, go get our papers, fold them up. And he told me, he says, I'll help you as long as you get up. But if you're going to get up after 7, I'm gonna help you.
Mm.
So I got up late one time and I had 2 bags on my side. I looked like the Michelin Man. I was like snow deep. I'm like, boy, I should have got up. I tried to sleep in, but I paid for it. Yeah. Well,
And
we
he
had,
made you pay for
oh,
it.
yeah. Yeah, he didn't help me. So, but yeah, we had to earn our way. We go shovel driveways, cut grass, stuff like that. I mean, you're not just going to sit around and watch TV, even though we had like 3 channels back then, but that was it.
At what age was it considered
Mm.
like you got to start finding a job
Uh,
in your household?
I'd say between 10 and 12. Because at 10, we were already shoveling neighbors' driveways, cutting grass. But paper out was like the real job. And
How
for
old were you when you were doing that?
I was probably about 12, 13. 'Cause I worked with my brother for about 2 years, and then he was old enough to get a job, so they handed it down to me. But I ran mine a little different.
Mm.
So back then, the newspapers were 65 cents a week, and we had like 300 customers. We had like 4 streets we had to deliver. And my brother, we used to have a book. We had to log in the address, if you paid, if you didn't. So my brother, if you didn't pay, he'd still give you your paper. And I'm like, when he gave the route to me, um, if you didn't pay within 2 weeks, because you're talking 65 cents, that's not that much. But um, 2 weeks, I let you go. 3 weeks, you're not getting a paper. So one time during the winter, got done with my route, got in bed, and the phone rang. My dad answered. He was kind of upset because the guy on the phone was upset, and he's like, "Dan, there's a customer said he didn't get a newspaper. This was Sunday's paper, okay?" And I said, "Dad, what's the address?" And he gave me the address. I said, "Dad, he hasn't paid me in 3 weeks. He's not getting a paper." And my son gets on the phone. My son says, "You haven't paid him. That's why he didn't get a paper." Well, if he comes right now, I'll pay him. But my brother, he used to just let them get by.
Mm.
But we had to pay the bill every week. So
Mhm.
you don't
Mhm.
pay. I don't get paid. You don't pay. So you don't get a paper. So yeah, I did my route a little different.
Wow, and so that must have been a lesson for you to see the difference of how your brother did it and then how you did it,
Yeah.
and
Well,
then the outcome. Did you see the difference there?
yeah, because the difference is you get enough to pay for your newspapers, then you had to go still collect the rest to pay yourself.
Mm.
So that's how we got paid. So, and if they don't pay, then I don't get paid. So, and if you don't get your paper, I think that sends a statement that I want to get paid. We used to have a little change thing on our hip. We used to have the quarters, dimes, and nickels.
Okay.
And when they gave us $1, 35 cents, here's your change, because it was only 65 cents a week.
Mm.
But the extra money, some people would pay by the month. So I would put money in a jar to pay for the following week. I wouldn't use it all at once. That's how my brother did it. He said, "Oh, I got enough to pay for my bill already, the newspapers." But he ended up short 2, 3 weeks down the month. So it was a little different.
Okay, okay. So you have 3 brothers
Yes,
and the 3 are older.
correct.
So in a sense you were kind of able to learn from their
Oh
mistakes.
yes, yeah, definitely. Even when they got grounded, I ask them, like, "Why Dad spank you?" I didn't come home on time, broke curfew. And my older brother, I'd ask him, so "What'd you do wrong?" Took the car without permission, and so I would download what not to do. Not
Mm.
that I was better than them, but I just didn't want to get what they were getting. So
Right.
yeah, I was a little. I guess it paid to be the youngest one.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So how was it like with your parents? Were they both very strict? Um, or how strict were they? Because you mentioned you had to have grades a certain
Mm,
way, and it sounds like your father kind of like what he
mm,
said is what he did. Like if you didn't wake up, he was not gonna
mm.
wait for
Oh
you.
yeah, everything was a lesson with him, and you got to read between the lines sometimes. But with him, they were strict because that's the way they were brought up,
Mm.
you know. And it's it's different, now generation. But back then, I'm kind of glad that I was raised the way I was because it instilled work ethic,
Mm.
stuff like that. But yeah, they didn't cut us too much slack. I mean, as long as you did what you were supposed to, you were good.
How did he reward you?
Um, well, like when I was 15, my brother was working at Burger King, and he says, "Hey, they're hiring. I can get you in there." And I was still 15 at the time, so I left the paper out, and he got me in there. And during high school, they would give you like half a credit if you had a job. So they would let me leave so I could go to work, and my dad would let me use the car.
Mm.
So to me, that's how I got rewarded. But it was always a rule: go to work, go to school, come home, no in between. You can't, you know, I'm giving you the car, but don't abuse what I'm doing for you.
Okay,
So
so
yeah,
using that transportation was your reward because it made it easier for
r-
you to.
right. They didn't have to take us anymore because if you're not old enough to drive, they got to tote you all over. So once we learned how to drive and everything was going smooth, you were good. But the minute you messed up, that's when you had to pay for it. So
Did you get in trouble?
uh, no, I really didn't get in too much trouble because I was just into sports and school, work. That
Did
was it.
did they have that rule in school where no pass, no play?
Yes.
They
Yeah.
did have that
Yeah.
rule then?
Yes. Back then it probably worded a little different, but yeah. So, but I was kind of like at home too. You don't do this, you don't get to do this. So, um, but it was a life lesson for me, which my dad always, we were, always tell the story of I was riding bikes with my friends. I stopped at my house. I think I had four of my friends with me. And I stopped in, went in the kitchen. I think I grabbed an apple. It was the last apple in the bowl. And my dad was in the kitchen at the time. And I grabbed it and I was starting to run outside. He goes, "Hey, where are you going?" I'm like, "Outside." He goes, "But what about your friends?" I'm like, "Well, I'm hungry." He goes, "Well, don't you think they're hungry? I mean, you can't go eat the apple in front of your friends. You don't have anything to offer them." And I'm like, "Oh boy, here we go." So I had to take it back, put it back in the bowl, which is a good point. If you don't have enough to share with your
Mm.
friend, how would you like it? That's what he told me. What if you stopped at
Mhm.
their house and they came out with some water and didn't offer you any? So, but everything I did, there had to be a life lesson
Mm.
on why you did this.
Okay.
So, and for me, I'm like, for my kids, that's how I raise them. Because if it worked for me, it's going to work for them. You
This
know,
the same recipe.
right. Don't tweak it, just keep it the same. And my kids, "Oh boy, Dad, another talk." I'm like, "I got them. I'm going to pass them on to you." So
How's your relationship with your mother?
my mom, she was strict. A lot of people, if you're at the bottom of the order, they think you're the spoiled one. You're the baby. But my older brother was, I think, in my opinion, was the spoiled one
Mm.
because he was the oldest. Anything that he wanted, most likely he got. He played in a band, so they got him guitars. And in Michigan, we have basements, so he joined a group, and they were buying him PA systems, and next thing you know, they were practicing in the house, but we weren't allowed to touch the equipment or so. It was,
You saw a little bit of.
yeah, you can,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. So, where do you find your love?
Um, from growing up, from watching my parents, even though they struggled when they first started out, they tell me the stories how they started out, but I see the passion they had with each other, and um, I think that's where it comes from. You know, it's I can't speak for my brothers, but for me, being the youngest, I was home probably the longest, so I got to see a lot with my parents interact, how they treat each other. They treated each other like equals. So whatever my dad did for my mom did for my dad in
Mm.
different ways. But you know,
When did you start dating?
dating, ooh, uh, 16. Yeah, I was asked to stand up in a quinceañera, and my my wife now, she called me and she says, "Hey, do you want to stand up in this quinceañera?" And I'm like, boy, I was like shocked, like she's calling me, because I didn't date, I didn't go out. I was always playing sports, but
Mm.
then, I got this one call, and I guess that's all it took. So, but the thing was, another girl had asked me already.
Oh.
Yeah. So, but she had an older boyfriend.
Mm.
She was like 15, 16. The guy was like 18. So I knew the guy, and she just needed an escort to march in. But when my wife called me, I'm like, had to figure it out. Okay,
You
this
had to
one.
weigh your options.
Yeah, and that was real quick. So she said, and my wife, she was a little spunky back then, and she's, well, tell her I asked you first. And I said, okay. So I called her up and said, hey, I can't stand up with you. I'm standing up. Yeah. And so I'm standing up with Irene. She goes, oh, okay. So she found somebody else, just like she found me. And
Right.
my wife was surprised. Her name's Irene. She says, oh, you did? And I'm like, yeah, we're standing up. So I always tease her. I said, I had to pay like $90, $100 for that tuxedo. So, and I was just working at Burger King at the time. So, and I tease her that I had to buy her a fresh bouquet to march in with.
Oh,
And
okay.
she gets me this little plastic boutonniere. I'm like, you got the better of the deal. So, but then she was just trying to ask me to like stand up also. And I just kept coming around and coming around. So her mom said, hey, I thought you were just standing up with him. And she goes, well, I thought so too, but he keeps coming. It's either her parents own a party store. They own a little Mexican party store. So, and I would kind of make pit stops on the way to the mall and go visit with her. And you mentioned earlier in the question, did I ever get in trouble? That's when I started getting it.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's been 2 occasions where the car didn't start when I would go visit her. The brakes went out one time, the battery went dead, and I'm like, well, now I'm dead because they got to come get the car and they got to know where I'm at. And they're like, well, I gave you the car to go to the mall. You were going to go shopping. And so,
Whoops.
yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know what it was, but every time I was in the car, something, for all things, the brakes to go out. So I had to call my dad. I'm like, where are you at? You at the mall? I'm like, no, I'm at Garra's Market. So, which he knew where it was because it was right. My dad worked at General Motors, so the store was right across the street. So,
Okay.
yeah. So I got in trouble my own kind of ways.
You chose your battles.
Right. There you go.
Yeah. Were they worth it?
Yes, yes, yes. We're married. We're going on 47 years, April. So, yeah. But, it hasn't been easy. We've had our struggles just like my parents did, but we're still here.
That's incredible, especially nowadays, right? Yeah, that's okay. So, okay, I'm really excited. So, hopefully we can dive into and giving us some tips on how to maintain
Well,
a happy marriage.
that goes back to your other question was like, you know, uh, when you asked me what was the question? Like my love of my parents, seeing that. My dad would, back then, you didn't have remote starts. My mom worked at the hospital, and he would go in the wintertime, start her car, scrape the windows. So when she got out of work, she would have a nice, clean car, warm car to come home in. He did stuff like that, And who does that? She worked third shift. So, And then she was always cooking, no matter what. She was always doing what she was supposed to do. So I think that's where that love comes from. Is I try to share that with her, and she works hard and she does things for me. So it kind of it's not one sided. It's not a one way street. So yeah,
Did you kind of look for that when you were, I guess, now inspired
yes,
to look for love? Did you look that for that in your wife? Like,
I did.
mhm.
But her family, she comes from a family of nine, and there were seven girls, two boys. The boys were the oldest and youngest. I've never had sisters, so I didn't know what it was like to be around that many girls. So um, they some her sisters did like me, some didn't. You know how
Mhm.
that goes. You're not good enough for my sister, blah blah blah. So, um, but
So it was
eh,
different. It was different. Being around girls was different.
yes.
How so?
Well, they're strong. They're her family's very strong family because they when there's nine, you got to fight for stuff, for clothes and everything. So
Okay.
it was, she wasn't used to me being, um, what's the word, like trying to open doors for her and do this and do that. She was more like, oh, I can do this myself. Oh, you see,
Okay.
yeah, I'm
Okay.
independent. But see, I wasn't trying to do that. I was just trying to do what my parents were doing. My dad does for my mom. That
Like that the version of being a gentleman, I
Yes,
guess.
yeah, that's my dad. My dad was grooming me. When you start dating, you gotta open the door for the girl and pull out her chair. And I'm like, you know, I don't, is this stuff gonna work? I'm asking myself. And then when I started to do it, it wasn't working.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's a story in itself. But
Did she finally kind of accept that,
oh
or
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Does she love it now?
Oh yeah. I still open her door to this day, and um, I think I mentioned to you before about losing my man card because we're at one of the bars the other day, and my wife was like, "Oh yeah, he gets my towel for me, and he does this. He brings me coffee in the morning, makes me coffee." She's going on and on about me, but you know,
Mm.
she shouldn't have. Not in the bar. And she tells her husband, or the husband was hearing it, and he goes, "Oh no, my dad was military. If he caught me doing that, he'd do this to me and that to me." And I'm looking at him, and I'm like, "Well, to each their own. You got a different upbringing." So, but to him, that wasn't manly to take care of your wife.
Mm.
So
Mhm. Mhm.
so
No, I we did touch base on that, but
mm,
I and like I said before, I feel like society now, I feel for men because I feel like society is so hard on men
mm,
these days. And but anyways,
mm,
that is a story within
yeah.
itself. Okay,
Mm,
so growing, did you interact much with her family as you were dating your wife?
yes. We a lot of functions together. Um, I used to work at their party store. I think mostly the son-in-laws did at one time or not another. But then there was a guy that came in. He was delivering goods to the store, and he was from Detroit. I said, "Hey, you guys hiring or anything?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Come on, I'll give you a job." But that's Detroit. That's 100 miles south of where we lived. But I was just trying to be, independent, have our own place. So we moved to Detroit. But you're talking 17, 18 at the time we were. So it's like moving to Dallas from a small town. You know, if you're not from a big city, it's just going to eat you up.
Mhm.
So that's what we went through.
Okay, okay. So you by the time you move, you were dating about 2 years
Yes,
in.
yes,
And did you propose, or how did you, when
mm
did you start living together before you moved?
yes, yes. And
How
that's
was
why we wanted our kind of independence a little bit. I was like, oh, I can take care of you. I can work. This guy's going to give me a job. And by that time, we already had my son already. So we got an early start on life. So
Okay. So when did you and your wife move in together?
um,
Or how old were you? Or how deep in the relationship were you?
it was right. It was right from the beginning. I mean, I to this day I always tell her I felt a little embarrassed that I asked her because you're talking 17. You know, I said when she told me she was pregnant, and I'm like, my knees buckled. You know, and
Okay, so is that where it started?
yes, and then
Okay.
I says, well, what are you gonna do? I says, you gonna have an abortion? You're gonna have the baby? What are you gonna do? She looked at me and she goes, abortion? She goes, no, I'm gonna have this baby. And she was 16 at the time, and she says, with or without you, I'm gonna have this baby. So, and to rewind a little bit, my dad always told me, you know, he says, well, when he was trying to tell me how to be a gentleman, he also tried to tell me about women, you know, if they're seeing other guys, they get pregnant, they might be looking for a dad, basically.
Yeah.
And when she said, with or without you, I'm going to have this baby, I'm like, boy, that just threw all that stuff my dad told me out the window, you know? And I'm like, so I moved out. And we've
Where'd you
been,
move into?
we moved with her sister, moved in with them, didn't have anything. And at the time, she was still working while she was pregnant at her parents' store. And then they said, well, hey, you might as well come work too. So we were both working there. And then, you know, the guy from Detroit delivering the stuff, he said, hey, if you want a job, come on out. So that's how we ended up in Detroit. But the story in Detroit was we had no phone, no furniture. My son was in his walker. He could go from one end of the room to the other and just didn't run into furniture. You know what I mean? So he learned how to walk real quick. Uh, no curtains. We had sheets for curtains. I mean, we were just two young people trying to make it, struggling. And sometimes I would come out of work and my wife was back in Saginaw. She would grab my son and go on the Greyhound. And I didn't know until I got home. And I had to wait till the weekends, and I'd go back and get them and come back because it's just that she wasn't used to that kind of life. Neither was I. So we had to figure out something real quick because I don't know if I think I told you the story of my son when he got sick. He had a temperature of 104, and we took him to the hospital, Ford Hospital, and they said, do you have insurance? I said, no. And they just, well, give him Tylenol. We can't do anything for you. I mean, I got him in my arms. His eyes are just rolling back in his eye socket, and you know. And we took him to another hospital, and they said, do you have insurance? No. So we took him home, and I called my mother. She worked for the hospital in the nursery. And I said, Mom, I said, Dan's really sick. And I said, we don't know what to do. The hospital won't take him. And she just said, well, just strip his crib, get some towels, put them in the tub, get him nice and cold, and put him between the two towels. And we finally broke his fever. And yep, that was an awful feeling that you're helpless. You can't help your kids, you know. So that was my aha moment that I need to be a real dad, you know, to get a job with insurance. I found another one. I had Blue Cross, and that kind of helped. Of course, you know, you had to pay for it. And then being in Detroit, you have Ford, GM, Chrysler, and I couldn't get in over there. So I went back to our hometown, Saginaw, and I got in at, back then it was called Saginaw Steering Gear. They made all the steering components for General Motors. And once I got in there, it was like, I don't want to say financial freedom, but it was insurance freedom for me. All I cared about was that Blue Cross. So, I mean, once I got paid, yeah, it made a little difference. But just to let you know, back then, I was making $6 an hour. You're talking 1976. So that was a changing moment for me. And one thing about my rule was my kids got sick, you're going to the doctor, you're going to the hospital. That's not going to happen again. So, it,
What a lesson.
yes, it's, I think,
That turned your life around, it sounds
yes,
like.
yes. So, I went from being a teenager to being a parent
Mhm.
within 5, 10 years altogether at once. So, but my kids would always say, Dad, you don't have any friends, I'm like, I'm not worried about that. I'm just worried about you guys taking care of you. I got friends at work, but not that I need to have like go hang out and do things. So I grew up really quick at a young age. So it was more serious.
Hmm.
That was the thing. Dad's really serious. My brothers would even tell me, "You're so serious. You take everything." Well, I had to because I had to catch up. You know. So,
That's how you felt, you had to,
oh
like,
yeah,
catch up?
catch up. My dad, uh, when he found out that um, Irene got pregnant, he had a meeting with me at McDonald's. He wanted to talk to me why he moved out, and he says, "Why did you do what you did?" I said, "Dad, you always told me to take care of my responsibilities." He goes, "Yeah, but not like that. You're young. You got to finish school." And he had this serious talk with me, and he was asking me all these questions. And he says, "I said, Dad, but it's hard. He says, "Well, this is what you wanted. You moved out." He says, "You're at the bottom of the barrel." That's what he told me. He said, "Now you got to work your way out." He wasn't there to give me money, sympathy. He just wanted to talk to me and find out, what was in my head. What was I thinking?
Mm.
And so that was a life lesson there too, because he didn't cut me any slack. He just said, "Hey, you got to make it happen. You're young. You got some big shoes to fill." That's what he told me. But he said, "You're young. You can do it."
Mm.
So
Did that give you some sense of, like, empowerment or encouragement to
yes, yes. Because the thing is, when you're young and your parents are telling you things about life and it goes in one ear out the other, but then when I was struggling, it was like I need to download all this information he was giving me. So it started to come into play because you always think your kids aren't listening, but they are,
Mm.
and you need to, you know, start thinking about the good things on how you were raised. So that helped me out quite a
And
bit.
pass it down?
Yeah, it kept me grounded.
Mm.
So.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was those talks my parents gave us. And I'm pretty sure they gave my brothers the same talk. But for me, it resonated more because me starting out at a young age, it came into play a lot. And I found out not too many years after that, my dad was telling me his story, how they started out, and I ended up almost mimicking how they started. They
Mm.
were almost the same age. Came down to Michigan with nothing. He had a cousin that worked at General Motors, and he said they're hiring. He says, if you come down, you can stay with me. And if you get in, back then you had to wait 2 weeks before you got paid. He goes, you got to get an apartment. I'll put you up for 2 weeks. And my dad told me, he says, we had no furniture. Sounds familiar. We had no curtains. Sounds familiar. He said, we had milk crates for chairs, but we were happy because we were together. We had our own place. I had a job. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't have to have a lot of material things to be happy. You just have to be happy with each other,
Mm.
even though you're struggling,
Mhm.
So,
'Cause that is, I guess, the journey,
right.
right? And
Yeah.
then your weight on working together, and that's your team, your
Mm.
teammate to get through. So okay, so you're in Detroit, and when we're in Texas now,
Mhm.
how do you end up in Texas, or how did
Mhm.
that transfer?
Well, my son Dan also worked for General Motors, and he transferred here first. I think it was 2000, and
Okay, so maybe I'm skipping down the line. That's a little while back
mhm.
then, because how many kids do you have now?
I have three. I
3.
have my son Danny, my son Michael, and my daughter Crystal.
Okay. And were they all born in Michigan?
Yes. So it's funny how my in-laws and my parents all born in Texas. They moved to Michigan. We're all born in Michigan. Now everybody's migrated back to Texas. So, I mean, this is where the work is. This is where, things are different. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, I was curious about when you mentioned moving to Detroit and that everything was different. What did you? I meant to ask. What did you expect moving in to a bigger city? Like, what were your expectations at the time?
I thought, when you're that young, you just think, okay, hey, we're going to find an apartment. I'm going to have a job and everything's going to be great. But it was the total opposite. A lot of crime. A lot of highways. You're not used to commuting like that, and just uh, going to work, no phones. It was like, how do I put it? We were together, but everything was moving so fast, and we couldn't catch up because we were so young and behind. So
Okay.
yes,
And then the when Danny got sick, um, that was the aha
oh
moment to make a change
right, yeah,
or another change.
yeah, because you can look in the mirror and say, are you a dad or are you just a father? What are you? Anybody can go out and make a kid and say, hey, I got some kids or whatever. But taking care of them and raising them, it's a whole different thing. So,
Do you think that at the time, deep down, you knew you could do better than what you were doing too? Did you feel like you were leaving, some sort of skill or something on the table?
yes, it's a good question because in high school, um, I was a junior, I think, and I dropped out of high school because Irene got pregnant. So, and that was another question my dad asked me, like, hey, what are you going to do about school and stuff? But again, he worked for General Motors. We struggled, again, going back to that, but we never thought you were like poor or anything. We had things and we had a good life. And my wife, she grew up in even though there was 9 of them and they had the store, they even owned a gas station. So they grew up in a good surrounding, with not doing without, put it that way. And when we moved to Detroit, it was just different. It wasn't like, oh yeah, you're gonna get together, get married, have a little house with a picket fence, and everything's going to be, it
Mm,
wasn't like that. It
hmm.
wasn't
Like that, like a storybook.
right, nothing like that. So we struggled on just try to be with each other because of what we were used to, you know. So
Okay. Did you have a plan after you find out that you're going to be a father? Did you and Irene start kind of making a plan, or you just kind of take things as they
we
come?
took it one day at a time, but then when you're that young, you say you're in love, and but there's a lot to go with that. Love is a big word with empowerment of, do you just love me or do you want to do things for me or do you want to provide for me? So
Hmm.
we had to learn that. So
Mm.
we were two young teenagers just in love, but not knowing when you have a child you have to take care of. It's not just the two of you. Now you got to take care of somebody else, and it changes everything.
Mm.
So when you're that young, you say, "Oh, you're in love. Oh, that's puppy love or whatever." But then when you have a child, it changes everything. So what does love mean to different people?
Hmm.
So
Right.
so
Would you say having a family or kids with your wife, did that enhance your relationship with your wife?
it did because, well, for me, I'm the youngest. I didn't have any younger brothers or sisters. So when I had my son, I was like, man, I can't wait to get him a mitt and football, basketball. And there's a story to that too. When we lived in Detroit, my my parents would bring us things that we needed. Tires for my car. He'd have a tire in his car. Like, hey, you need new tires. Um, and he bought all my my brothers, their kids, a tricycle and a wagon. Okay. So with that, he brings the tricycle to Detroit with the wagon and he gives it, their grandparents. And I was angry because that was my job to get my son his first bike. Like I said, first met basketball. And it wasn't until I got older that it's like, why am I so angry? I mean, they're just being grandparents. They did that for my other brothers. And so when I figured it out, I was like, my wife's always, whenever we had garage sales, she was always trying to get rid of his tricycle and his wagon. And I kept that. I still have it. And you're talking before he could walk. So, yeah, I still have it. And she says, you need to get rid of that. You don't need it anymore. I said, but it's to me, it's what I couldn't do for my son. But then again, it's what they did for my son. So it has a
Had a
double meaning.
sentimental value.
Yes, but it was a teaching to me of you got to flip the script sometimes, because I was angry just trying to be a dad and like, oh, I want to do this for him. You're doing that for him. I want to do it, and I didn't know better. Okay. So, but now I get it.
Yeah.
So I do that for my kids. I always try to explain to the other half, say, this is why I'm doing it. I don't want to take nothing from you, but if that's okay, this is what I want to do.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
So, but you even changed the phrasing now.
Yes. Yeah.
So that they understand
Right.
why you're doing it.
Yeah. Not to do the way I was thinking.
Right.
Yeah. There's always a way to switch it around. Like they say, turn lemons into lemonade type thing. So for me, that resonated with me. So.
Okay. So then you have another son, your son second, or because your daughter's the youngest, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how far apart?
They're 4 years apart. So that's another story. My son tells me, Danny tells me, we're doing good. I'm at Saginaw Steering Gear, and Dad, he says, I'll never forget it. He said, Dad, I was a mistake. I said, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, I was a mistake. He goes, you're at General Motors and you plan to have Mike and Chris, but I'm a mistake. And I'm like, I said, Dan, God don't make mistakes. I said, you're here for a reason. I don't know if I was planned, but I'm here. You got to make the best of it. I said, but you're the reason I am who I am, because you changed my life. I told him that. But it kind of hurt that he, he's young. He's 10 years old or something. He asked me, oh, it was a mistake. And I've never had that question asked to me, I've never asked my parents, hey, was I planned? I mean, planned on having me, So, but that was my best answer to give him. God
that
don't
was
make
a great answer.
Yeah. So, but yeah, to this day, I tell everybody it's because of him that made me grow up. So,
right.
And it's not like how do I put it? Did I take your childhood away from you or your teenage years? No, I made that choice. So.
Did you always knew that, or did you realize that at a later time? Like, no, that was on me. That was my choice. Like, did you know? Did you just, the way you were raised, you just owned up to what you did?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was told to me on both sides, on my in-laws' sides too. Like, hey, are you gonna, imagine my brother-in-laws had the same. Well, I'm guessing they had the same talk I did, but my father-in-law, like, hey, what are you gonna do for my daughter, and how are you gonna support her, and you don't even have a car, and I mean, I tell everybody, he just made wine out of me because he just kept stomping on me, and I told my wife, I says, not in a bad way, but I says, I'm not gonna let your dad have to talk to me like that again. I want to put it in the right perspective. Not that I was mad at him, but I mean, I had it coming. And when I had my daughter, I get it, because you want the best for your daughter, and somebody that's going to take care of her and do what you're doing and take it to that next level. My dad had a saying. He says, never give your kids any less than what I gave you. You can give them more, just don't give them less.
Mm,
So you raise the bar, not to spoil them, but to do things that I haven't done for you. So
that makes
yeah,
sense. That's huge.
yeah.
We need more of your fathers around.
Oh yeah. Well, he's still around. He's 88,
Yeah,
and
we need more of him.
yeah, I can call him, and he puts me in my place.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Who was your biggest? Did you have um someone you looked up to growing up,
I
like an
would
idol or?
I would say it was my dad, and my father-in-law,
Mm,
because of the way they did things. My father-in-law, on one hand, was very stern, you know, and he wasn't the guy that would come and give you a hug and son-in-law, you're doing good. I appreciate. But he would come to my house almost every Sunday, and he would bring the other grandkids, and they would go swimming. And he'd always park in my yard. I was trying to get my yard green, and I said, Irene, your dad's parking in my yard. Well, you go tell him to move his car. And I'm like, the car stayed there. You know? But he would come all the time. And I think that was his way of telling me that you're doing a good job. You're
Okay.
taking care of my daughter, you know. But he never came out and verbally just come out and say it that way.
Okay.
But he wasn't that type of person, you know. He was
Mhm.
really, when he said something, you do it. And he was old school, put it that way. So I got a lot of respect for him too.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. So then, you are moving to Texas. What brings you to Texas?
Well, my wife wanted to be here with Danny, and she says,
Oh,
"Well,
because he moved here
he moved here
first.
first,
Okay.
and he called us. He's all excited, like for us to go see the Detroit Lions, we had to drive like an hour and a half. Go see the Tigers, hour and a half. Basketball, Pistons, hour and a half. And he said, Dad, they're down the street. Cowboy Stadium, the old Cowboy Stadium. The Rangers are right here. He goes, everything's here. They got all these nice restaurants. And my wife says, well, they have a Hellsberg Diamonds at the Parks Mall, and you can go work where Dan's at, and we can all transfer. Everything's good. So, and at that time, I had 26 years in at General Motors. And I'm like, man, I thought I was going to retire here, and I got a few more years to go. And so we upped and moved. We were like the Beverly Hillbillies. We just up and left and came, and here we are, So,
What year was that?
2003.
Okay.
Yeah, it took me a little bit to adjust to the General Motors here because this is an assembly plant. They built vehicles. We just built the parts that went in them, so it was a little different setup. Put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you did transfer to this GM.
Yes.
Okay. How
Yeah.
was that transition? Did they make that pretty
Mm,
easy or?
no, because you're an outsider when you come in, and I get it. They think you're coming to take their jobs and stuff. So, um, it's
Was it a long process?
for me, it was to settle in because of the mindset of
Mm-hmm.
the people working in there.
Mm,
So it was a little different. Of
the
course,
mindset. How was the mindset different?
well, they didn't want to show you what they needed to do. They weren't like, there was resentment, like, oh, you're going to come take my job. I'm like, here, I'm just here to work. I'm not here to take your job. You know, when anybody transfers, um, I got hired in 1976. So like I said, I had 26 years, but I didn't come with that seniority in this plant. They give you a new seniority date, which is 1984. You could have 100 years in at another plant. You're going to have 84 seniority because they have to have a cutoff, so you're not taking someone's job. So, um, but it was okay with me because I knew that I was seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. That I knew I was going to retire soon. So I'm not here to take your job. I'm just here to make a living like you are and do a good job.
And so, how did the conversation go with moving down here? Who brought it up?
Mm,
And
it was my wife. She's like, "Oh, we're gonna put the house up for sale and move." And the thing about it is, when you put in your paperwork to move, you kind of know they're gonna accept it right away within 2-3 weeks or something. Yeah, they took my application, and I came down with my youngest son, Mike, and they had to pack everything, get everything, because I was already working here. So they sold the house and had to get the movers, and so it was a quick process.
So you agreed right away?
Yeah, I mean, well, I take that back. I was outside of the plant. They had benches outside, and I was out there, and I had one of the engineers come up to me. Hey, Dan, looked like you lost your best friend. I'm like, no, I'm just thinking. My wife wants to move to Texas. I just figured I was going to retire here. And he goes, if I could move, he goes, I would. He says, if it don't work out, you can always come back. And I'm okay. Mindset. He changed everything. And that's when I didn't give my wife a hard time about moving because, change isn't easy. You've been in your comfort zone for so long. I had a good job. And, you're going to leave this, go do something different. So, but when I talked to him, he's like, I can't move. I'm stuck here. He goes, but you can transfer, stay there for 2-3 years, and then you can come back. You have it. You have options. I don't have that option. So when he told me that, it just kind of resonated a little different.
How old are where are your other two kids at?
Okay.
Are they in Michigan or are they in Texas?
One's in Michigan. My son, Michael, he's 43 and he'll be 44 this year. He actually worked here at General Motors, but he had a family, and his girlfriend at the time just was like, I want to move back home. She got homesick. So he moved back.
They moved.
They moved back.
When you and your wife moved down here, did your son and your daughter move with you?
Yes.
As well?
Yeah, they came.
Were they living with you?
Yes.
They were living with you.
Yeah.
Okay. And your oldest son was living in Texas. Was he he already had made his life?
Yeah, he was here, and we actually stayed with him before we bought our house. Until everybody moved here. So,
okay.
Yeah. So that worked out pretty good.
Okay. Okay. So your two youngest kids, how old are they? Because I'm curious to know how old they were when they agreed even to move down here, because that's a big move for everyone.
Yes. Well, my son's 43. My daughter's 40. And we asked her.
That's 20 years ago. So they were about 20, 23.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they just
How did they take it?
My daughter was like, all in. I'm not staying here. If you guys are moving, I'm coming. So, yeah. So she came. My son, too, my youngest son, he said, yeah, I want to come. So he was down here working at a few jobs down here. And then he ended up moving back.
Okay. Had they been here a few times already that they liked it?
Yeah. It's just Michigan back in the day. It was like all General Motors, the big companies, Dow Chemical, you name it. Those were the jobs to have. Okay. But now it's like it's starting to dwindle, and you come here and you're like, oh, you work for General Motors, and they're like, where's that? They don't even know where it's at, the plant. So it's no big deal. But you're in Michigan, that's all Ford, Chrysler, GM. It's all,
That's what's leading everything in that area. Okay. Okay. So then you move down here, you live with your oldest son until you buy a home?
Yeah, we found home. I was all over, and we ended up finding something that my daughter-in-law, Sophia, says, hey, they're building houses over here about a mile down. So sure enough, but I had the realtor guy taking me all over. Didn't know where I was going, Grand Prairie, everywhere. And I said, no, I want to stay somewhere close where my son lives. So, and they were just building, the house was built. So we just had to make a few changes and moved in. The thing we're not used to is the property. Michigan, you have property. You have to have riding lawnmower just to cut your grass. Over here, you don't even need a lawnmower to cut your backyard. Everything's on top of each other. So
yeah, was a transition to Dallas or Arlington much easier than when you were younger transitioning to Detroit?
Yes, because you're talking, we're more mature time. Where she was financially set with Hellsberg, and I was with General Motors. So yeah, it was a lot easier. But 17, 16, Going to a big city just didn't work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. Oh wow, man, that's a lot of like that's already it feels like a long life up until when you moved to Dallas. Like like you've been through so much
Much.
because once you move to here to Arlington, you're kind of more stable, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and that was the thing, I mean, we gave up a lot. High school. We didn't even go to the same high school. So um, I left. I went back, graduated, but it wasn't the same. You don't get to walk with your class, up on stage and, have your parents proud of you. And, some people, diploma, graduation, it's no big deal. But to me, it was because I missed out on that.
Mm.
And I would run into my schoolmates and they're like, hey, we're having our 10th year reunion. Aren't you coming? I'm like, I'm not part of the class. And they're like, oh, yeah, but you can still come. It's like, that's not the same. I lost touch with a lot of my classmates because I went from being in high school to being a parent. I mean, it doesn't have to go that way, but you make choices. And that's what I chose. I wanted to be a parent. So you just don't have, you're not in touch with a lot of your friends.
Had you thought about parenthood at any point in your life prior to becoming one or finding out? Like you never put thought about it in the past?
Mm, no, I was just playing sports, being in high school, and um, that one phone call has changed my life. So
What how did you feel, I guess? Had you seen her already? Did you know about
I
her?
knew of her, and I had
Did you
been,
have your eyes on her already?
I did, but my thing was like, it's like, how can I put it? Um, that's like if J Lo gives you the time of day, that's how I felt with her. It's like, well, I wasn't like, again, I was just playing sports, not dating. I wasn't seeing girls or nothing. Like my brothers, I had 3 older brothers. Um, 2 of them were playboys. They had girls. They always had a different girlfriend. And um, with me, it was my parents just said, "Oh, you know, he'll come in time." I was uh, I was at home one time, and I was eating, and I can eat. When I was younger, I could just eat. But then I was playing with my food, and my dad looked at me. He said, "Hey, you okay?" And I looked at him. Yeah, I'm okay. I was just playing with the food. I wasn't eating it. He goes, "You got a girlfriend or something?" And I looked around, and I'm like, "Who told him?" Like he could tell because I was out of the norm for me. So he was starting to put the puzzle pieces together. Yeah.
Okay. And your brother started dating really
Oh
early?
yeah.
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 So what did you think at the time, since your mindset was kind of different than theirs? W- like did you I'm curious to know because it sounds like you were very methodical in the way you would see things and even just kind of like methodical is
Mm-hmm.
probably the best word I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
Um and your brothers sounds like they were maybe a little bit more experimental with
Yeah,
with life.
yeah, they were. I mean, with me, to this day, my older brother Phil, he calls me Mr. Cunningham from Happy Days because he was the nerd out of the group. He wasn't Fonzie. He was, you know, and
Yes.
that he
More
still.
disciplined.
All right, yeah. So he would, and he always told me, "Better not catch you drinking. Better not catch you smoking weed or nothing." Because he's like, "You're gonna do it. You're gonna go." Do things,
Mhm.
basically. I don't want you messing up, basically. So, but
Mm.
I took my own path, put it that way. But yeah, no, my brothers were strict on me.
Oh, were
But
they?
yeah, the thing is with my third oldest brother, he's 2 years older than me. He grew up with a different crowd, and my mom always wanted me to hang out with him to make sure he got home. I'm like, Mom, I like his friends, but that's not my thing, you know. And she's make sure you go with him, bring him home, make sure he gets. I'm like, well, he's supposed to look out for me. He's the older brother, but yeah, that's how it was, you know. So
Okay.
yeah,
What about your brother in the middle? How was your
Moses,
relationship with him?
we were good. The thing with Moses was, he's named after my dad, and he was raised by my grandparents here in Texas. So the story goes is my parents came down to Texas and to visit, and he got sick. So he was a baby at the time, so they couldn't bring him back. It's a long drive. Um, and when they came back to get him, um, my grandparents got attached to him. This is on my mom's side because they were all girls.
Mm,
And my grandfather never had a son. And I don't know how that came about, but he ended up growing up here in Texas.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a little hard for me because when we would come, my dad would get like a week, 2 weeks vacation. We'd come down, visit, go back. I always thought he was my cousin because, you know, being younger, you don't know. And we visit and then we come back to Michigan. So uh,
How did that make you feel?
I was curious why they let him grow up in Texas, you know, why they didn't bring him back. Because when he got older, he would drive, come visit, you know, and him and the two oldest ones, my older brother and him, they got along because they were into music and stuff. Um, but I think it was like in the 80s, um, 84, my brother moved to Michigan and I helped him get in at General Motors. And I'm like, man, this guy is like, he's like me. He's real laid back. We don't argue. To this day, we've never had an argument.
Mm,
And it's just getting to know him that was a missing point in my life to have a brother like him because my other brother used to beat on me. And my other brother would tell me what to do this, do that. So, but to have my brother Moses, it was like, man, he's easy going. You know, we get along, we click. So, but
okay.
then he came back. They had a big layoff in the 80s, and he came back to Texas, and he's been here ever since again. So,
Okay. I see.
yeah.
I want to touch base a little bit on fatherhood. I want to know what your mindset was, especially since it was such a defining moment when Danny got sick, your oldest son, and then that kind of changed your mindset. And I want to know how that even carried on as you had your other two
Kids.
children down the road, and kind of
Mm.
your vision of like raising your children, because it sounds like, and what I see is like you're very family oriented, very family focused. So
Yeah, it's, how do I put it? It made me grow up
mhm.
to be serious about things I need to, in your control, to do. And that's what it was. I don't know. It was that time, again, you mentioned when he got sick, it just changed me.
Mhm.
I just have to grow up and I need to do these things. I'm still learning to this day. Um, and with all three of my kids, with my youngest son, Mike, of course, I was at General Motors. He was happy go lucky. He's the middle child. And, you know, he would challenge us as parents. And that was just him. I like that energy he had. He was always, uh, he's a comic. He always likes to uh, make jokes and do things, you know. And then my daughter Crystal, if I would have my choice, if I would have had my son Mike was a girl, I'd be done. I'm like, okay, I got one of each. But she
Mhm.
comes from a big family. She wanted to have 9 kids. I'm like, I want to retire someday, you know? I mean, that's a lot of kids. So, well, we need to try for a little girl. And all right. And sure enough, we did back then you couldn't do a test to see what you're going to have, boy or girl. But with my daughter, she was 6 months pregnant and her water broke. She got up in the middle of the night and she's calling for me. And like, I'm like, what's up? And she goes, my water broke. I said, well, you got to go to the hospital. She goes, I don't want to go because they're going to keep me. And I'm like, well, you have to go because the water's protects the baby. I mean, she doesn't have that now. But at that time, we didn't
Right.
know. She goes, well, all along her pregnancy, she says, I know it's a girl because I just feel different than the way I was carrying the boys. So sure enough, we take her, and they had to induce labor. Um, and I didn't make it back for the delivery because I had to take my two sons to my brother's house so they could watch them and then get back to the hospital. So I get to the hospital, and she have her in the recovery room. It's a curtain there, and pull back the curtain. Where's the baby? She said she's upstairs. They took her up to the neonatal unit. Close the curtain, like, I got to make it upstairs. And then when I saw my daughter, when she was born, she was 1 pound 12 ounces. Yes. And when I saw her, the way I describe it is a baby bird coming out of an egg. It's got all the feathers, real, no features, and that's how I saw my daughter. And they had her under a cover of like a bubble, giving her oxygen, and you could see her just fighting to breathe. She could see her ribs, everything. She had no features at all. And I had my dad with me. He had just flew in from Texas, and he said, she's going to make it. But we're talking to the nurses, and they're like, no, she's awfully little. If she weighed a little more, it'd be different. And
What's going through your head
oh
at
yeah,
this time?
yes. I mean, we had to take a class. Why we were there, why she was there, and they would have a table like this, and all the parents are there, and they have these folders, and they're like, well, what if you name her Irene, and she passes away? You can't use that name again. You can't name one of your other kids Irene, And it had all these questions that you're thinking that's on your mind. You just don't talk about it. But it's written down. So all these other previous parents had put this information there to help other parents. And at 2 weeks, she had a bowel blockage. Her stomach got really big. We thought she was gaining weight, and they said no, her bowels wrapped around her appendix. So they had to take her appendix out at 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, she had blood going into her lungs. So they cut her behind the shoulder blade and went in and had to take care of, do surgery. That was the longest one. So we spent a lot of nights at the hospital. They have to be 5 pounds before they can come home, but that's a long process. We just didn't know if she was going to make it. They baptized her when she had the blood going into her lungs. They had a little cup of water, and they blessed her and gave her last rites, basically, because they just didn't know how the surgery was going to go. And did a lot of praying at that time too, because my mom worked at the nursery. She worked with babies at the hospital, and she just said, Mijo, you might want to get prepared for a funeral, because when they're that little, they don't make it, And the nurses there in the neonatal unit said girls are more fighters than boys. So I hung on to that, And because there's been a few up there that we'd go up to visit, you had to scrub, put the gowns on every time, and you notice the kids when you walk in, and now they're not there anymore. So you ask the question, what happened to the little one over here? Didn't make it. So, I tell people, when my mom told me that get prepared for a funeral, I was like, I didn't want to hear that. You want to hear something positive, like, oh, hey, she's a fighter or something. So what I did is I got my brothers, my father-in-law, got them to come to the hospital to visit, because you might not see her, And so they all did. My father-in-law came in. He looked one look at her and walked out of the room. He said, if she makes it, I'm going to put money away for her, blah, blah, blah. But he just couldn't stomach seeing her like that. So I did a lot of praying at the hospital. I told my wife, I said, I got on my hands and knees and I pray. I said, God, if you let her live, I will not spoil her. I won't like give her this and that. Let her live.
Mm.
I'll treat her just like the boys. Just let her live. And she's 40 today. I mean, she'll be 40. Her birthday's 26th of February. She'll be
Wow.
41. But yes. So each time it was like aha moment to do things, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So yeah. No, if you were to talk to my daughter, ever run into her and you say, "I heard your dad spoiled you," she'll say no. Mm-mm.
You
So
stewed by that on
oh
every
yes,
decision.
yeah. I spoiled her in my own way. But she was good in school. She did what she was supposed to do. So she never gave me, with my two sons, it was always a chess game to
Mm.
outsmart them. They were trying to outsmart me. So, but it was good. Uh, lucky for me, I was young at the time. So I was able to keep up with them, put it that way. So,
That's an interesting point.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up with my kids. I think that's the only advantage of having a family young is me and my son are 17 years apart. So I coached him in Little League. We played, coached him in basketball. I didn't do too well as a coach in basketball, but baseball, I coached him. My youngest son, I coached him. So, but yeah, I was able to do things. And going back to my parents, let me be a kid. I was able to let them be kids and have a childhood.
You kept that in
Yeah,
mind.
they worked too, don't get me wrong, but they also got to have both sides of it, work ethic and still be a young kid to do things, So
What What are some of the core values that were instilled in you that you have tried and maybe are trying? It's continued. Maybe you're still trying to instill in your family.
I think it's
Some of the
just
core values.
being outgoing, help people, um, share your whatever you learned with other people because you can't take it with you, you know. My parents always, you don't think about the things they tell you when you're young. Like my dad, he told me I was 17, and he says, you need to start looking for, you get older, look for a job with security, benefits, stuff like that. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, retirement? I'm 17 years old. I mean, you're not thinking that far ahead. But now, I'm grateful that now I didn't want to work in General Motors because he did.
Mm.
He'd come home dirty, full of sand, and I said, that's not for me. I'm going to school. And then with my son Danny, he told me the same thing. I said, I got an application here. It's for the summer. I'm not working in there. You and Grandpa worked in there. I'm not. I said, it's just the summer. You don't have to stay there. It's just a summer job. Anyway, fast forward to now. I'm retired. General Motors paying me every month. My dad's retired in '79. He's still getting a check from General Motors. He's 88. So hopefully I have his gene to stay longevity like him. But I get it now because General Motors is taking care of me. I found a job that has that security. It's not for everybody, and it wasn't for me at the time. But when you have that aha moment, you need to take care of your family. You bite the bullet and do what you need to do, So you embrace it instead of fight it,
Okay.
Because I said myself, just like my son told me, I don't want to work in there. But I think sometimes you come to the crossing roads of you got to make a decision, So it made a good life for me. Took care of my kids, and I'm happy that I finished the journey, retired, and put in my time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it's still paying off.
yeah. But I mean, I try not to take everything serious. Now we have, I have my wife back. As far as what I mean by that is, we don't have the kids, grandkids. It's just me and her. So we're making up for all this time that we didn't get to do when we were younger. We can pick up the phone and let's go here, let's go there, let's take a trip and do things. See, before it was the time span wasn't there for us to do things. And it's nothing against my kids. It's just
It's just
That's
how
our
it
choice.
was.
Yeah,
Right.
just how it was, but you make the best of it.
Yes. Yes.
So
I love that. So now you're just trying to kind of live those take those years back.
yeah, and one with the experience of what we learned, you know.
Mm,
So
okay.
that's the thing is, it's funny because I have a house now, a 2-story. It was filled full of my kids, and it has 4 bathrooms. But when we got together, our first house, I paid. Don't laugh, since you're in the real estate. I paid 8,300 for the house. I was renting the house. My wife found it, and I was paying. We were paying like 150 a month. 2-bedroom house and 1 bathroom. I had 3 kids in one room. I had bunk beds for the 2 boys. I had a crib for my daughter in one room. And
Where there's a will, there's a way.
yeah, and I had a lot of big yard to put a sandbox back there for them to do. They had a lot of room to play, and but
Who
we go back and look at where we started and where we're
mm,
at, and
mm,
you can appreciate. I got bathrooms that nobody's using now. You know what I mean? So I
yes.
got rooms that nobody's using, but before I had them all crammed in one room. But you learn to appreciate your journey.
Mm,
That's the thing.
mm,
So we've been on again. I'm not trying to say we're perfect because we're far from it. We have our arguments. We still do to this day. But one thing about us, I've learned from another couple. I says, "Well, what's your secret?" And they said, "We don't go to bed angry at each other because you never know what tomorrow's going to bring."
mm. So it's you mentioned not going to sleep mad at each other. How easy or hard or how was your wife also always in the same page of not going to sleep while mad, or did you guys have to learn to get to that point?
Yeah, because at first it was like you could be like 2 ships in the night. You just won't talk to each other, silence, and it doesn't get you anywhere. Um, I've learned to try to switch things around so I can understand it better in a different prospect. So in the morning, I make coffee like usual, and we won't talk about what happened the night before, at least not, the way we were talking to each other. So, I mean, we're learning. We still ask older couples now, like, "Hey, what's your secret?" Because you want the recipe to just be together.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think the interesting part or the recipe is of like the process how to deal with it, right? Because I think figuring out how to communicate, it's in, and you might have your way and it's not going to work for everybody else because everybody else is different. And you kind of have to figure out what you get with who that other person is also, and how to kind of combine that. So what was your experience with your wife? Like, what were some of the biggest challenges you had to learn to try to communicate and get to somewhere where you left it in the past and you're moving on from that challenge?
yeah, well, that's a good question because um, when we got together, um, we got married at the courthouse when it came time. Her parents signed for her because she was 17. I had to wait till I was 18 because my parents were against us getting married so young. So, um, and at that time, it was like I look at my wife and I'm like, man, we didn't get to graduate like we were supposed to. We didn't have our kids like, after everything in order. I mean, there's no written rule, but mostly, get engaged, plan your wedding, do this, do that, have your kids. We took shortcuts along the way. So for our 25th, I told her, I says, I want to get married in the church. She goes, I'm not going to marry you again. I'm like, well, I want to get married in the church. So we did. And we had to meet with the priest and everything and talk. And exactly what you're saying is I was telling him, I says, I did everything backwards. And the priest told me, his name was Father Dan. He says, Dan, he goes, that's the past. He goes, you're carrying this big cloud with you.
Mm.
Let it go. He goes, learn from it, but it's the past. You can't change it. Look at where you're at now. Your kids are going to be in your wedding. You didn't have anybody at your wedding. Your kids are going to be in it. Your grandkids are in it. Your family's in it. It's a celebration. And he changed me then at that time to make me think of it like, you got this ball and chain, let it go. And it's like, you're right. So, we're still learning at this time. And that's our 25th. So we're getting close to the 50. And now she says she's not going to marry me for the third time. So, but we'll see what happens.
You know what's funny is that I listened to this somewhere where it said that if you're not constantly getting, I think it said it differently, but it made me think of that actually. It said if you're not constantly falling in love all the
Mm-hmm.
time, that like something that you should be falling in love different times throughout your life, but it should be with the same person
Same person.
because we're constantly changing.
Changing, the, my wife, she'll say, oh, I'm gaining weight. Oh, I have a gray hair. I'm like, you're beautiful. You see things different. It's like, I try to, my dad always said, look, just because you have her, you got to keep her.
Mm.
You do what you did to, like, when you were pursuing her, keep that energy, and always don't just say, oh, I got her, and I don't have to worry about nobody else coming around. She was telling me this morning, she was at work. She works at the Hewlett Mall. It's her last day there. And she said, this guy was walking by. I guess he was a Walmart walker. And they just happened to look at each other, and he came in the store. He wasn't going to go in there. And she says, she greeted him, said, hey, can I help you? Can I do for you? He goes, I just want to tell you you're beautiful. And she told me that, and I said, wow, well, good for you. I mean, that's a compliment. But that's why I have to do what I do to raise the bar, because I always tell her, if something happens to me, next guy that comes around, if he can't do what I'm doing for you, then he's not for you, So you got to raise the bar. I write her, it goes I'm going to lose my man card, but I write notes for her. On her water bottles that she takes to work, put a little heart, or boss lady, or my dad calls her the first lady of Arlington. So I write first lady. And one day she says, hey, I'm out of water. I always keep them by her nightstand. So I put some water bottles there. She goes, well, hey, I don't have my emojis. My little, oh, my bad. So, but you get to the point of, try to do, I guess, corny stuff to keep that flame still burning. So,
I love it. And I don't think by any means that you lose your man card. I think if anything, that is the courageous or the man thing to do, because it's not easy. It's like it's not easy for most, like finding someone like you, based on like what I hear. Like I don't hear that all the time. You don't see that all the time. So, and I think we all know that us as humans, a lot of us like taking the path of least resistance, which is the easiest thing to do, which is maybe doing nothing. And you are putting in the work to keep to live your life that you want to live, really, and it may show as you treating your wife like, the person that you want her to feel like, maybe the princess that you feel she should feel like. And you're putting in the thought, you're putting in just trying to think of ways to make her basically continuously fall in love with you. And so that is that is so beautiful on it. And I don't say that for being a female, but I'm telling you, like, and look, I have nothing to say. I have such a wonderful husband, but just as being someone that likes to talk to people and even, you don't see that. And I want you to know from like my perspective that I think that is the man thing to do, because at the end of the day, everybody wants everybody at the end of the day, nobody wants to be alone. Like nobody wants to be lonely. Nobody, like, that's something that I think we can all deep down, if we really being real with ourselves, nobody wants to die alone. Nobody wants to be alone. And but you know what? It takes work, because some people may not be not alone. Some people may be together with whoever, but if you're not treating each other in a way that you are living a, say, less of a stress-free life, and living maybe the life that you want to live, not the life that other people think you should live, maybe whatever, and I know that maybe I think the internet right now maybe takes a lot of real estate in our minds. The internet, meaning we don't allow much time to think about things that are important to us and our future, especially, right? Our future, because we can think about what we want right now or in the next 5 minutes, or maybe by the end of the day or the week or the month. But maybe a lot of us don't think far enough to when we start losing people because of age and because of life, right? So you, even though, and this is crazier because in your mind, you're maybe thinking I'm losing my man card because maybe some people have said some things, but like that is, I'm so glad you're saying that right now, because and I hope like everybody hears this, and I'll make sure of it, because that is what we need to bring more joy to this world, happiness. And look, it shows being around you when I walk into the academy, like talking to you and your energy. It's like it's so pleasant. It's so good. It's like you have a good energy, I suppose you can say, that it's just so pleasant to be around. And it does, by me getting to know you a little bit better, it doesn't surprise me. Look, you are living the life you want to build, and you're grateful for it.
Yes, and not everybody has my journey. I
Mm.
get that, but I'm doing the best I can with what I've learned. And I can get, I can hang out with the guys if I want and, have beers and do whatever. But the part of me is what I've learned from my parents and seeing how they did things and if it worked for them. Now, for like my dad, my mom passed away in '86.
Mm.
And I saw what he did for her. And I saw what she did for him. And they had their arguments and stuff, usually about the boys, about my brothers and I. And she passed away, and my dad got remarried almost 30 years with his second wife. But he did the same thing that he did with my mom, treated
Mm.
her very good. And she passed away. And now he's by himself. Uh, he stays with my cousin. But I'm like, this man has been through a lot. He's lost not one wife, two wives, and now he's by himself. But he always has a strong spirit about him.
Mm.
And I've learned from that. And he's always, you take care of Irene, she's she's very good to you, and tell her I love her and blah, blah, blah. And he says, not that you're not doing these things, but always keep this in mind. So, you know, you can have as many arguments as you want, but you want to have the peace. You want to have the love. Again, that word is very powerful because love can mean a lot of different things to different people. You can say it and not have no meaning behind it. Well, you tell me all the time, but you don't show me.
Mm.
Or you buy me flowers, but you never tell me you love me. I mean, there's all kind of perspectives you can use. And I try to do it the best that I know how, because I'm not, how do I put it? I was never like, oh, you're a playboy. When I was in high school, the girls used to tell me, well, you want to go out? You want to do this? I'm like, no, I'm just playing sports. I wasn't interested. Oh, you're conceited. You think you're, I'm like, I had to look that word up. I didn't know what it meant, you know? But then I get that one phone call and it's like, yeah, this is the one for me. Now, how
Wow.
corny is that? Somebody tells you this is the one for me. And it's been that way ever since. Never ventured out anywhere or anything. It's like, oh, you and mom. When I try to talk to my sons about girls, what do you know? You've only been with mom all your life. I mean, what can you tell us, basically? You know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
What's your
yeah,
experience?
right. So,
What's
but
your resume look like
yeah,
with the
yeah,
ladies?
yeah. So, with my granddaughters and my daughters, I'm like, okay, what's this guy's, does he have a job? He has a car. My one granddaughter was staying with me. And I said, where are you going? Oh, I'm going out with so and so. I'm like, okay, how come you're going to pick him up? Well, his truck doesn't have AC. I'm like, what do you mean? His AC's not working. So you got to go get him. I said, if you want to go out with him again, he's got to come and get you. So she got up. She's upstairs doing her hair, got her makeup on. She looked really nice. She came back from that ride with no AC. I'm not going out with him no more until he fixes his truck. I said, that's why I wanted you to go out with him in his truck, because you shouldn't have to go through that. Your makeup was melting, your hair was all dry now. And she's got to see that,
A taste of what that would look like.
yes. And I said, he should be picking you up. I get it. I mean, it's different. Girls pick up the guys, whatever, but you're always picking him up.
Mm.
Why is that?
Mm.
Well, if he's going to have a date, he needs to fix his AC, or else he's not going to have a date, I guess. So,
Gotta
yeah,
work for it.
yeah. So all of them, I was always trying. Even my nieces on my wife's side,
Mm.
always trying to talk to them, and they still remember the talks. I don't know if they resonated, but I treated them like they were my daughters because they're girls.
Mm.
I'm giving them a guy's point of view. Look out for this, look out for that. Kind of like my dad was trying to school me,
Yes.
So, but for me, like again, my brothers, they've had a lot of girlfriends. They're good looking guys, I mean,
You're
it
good
wasn't,
looking. You're a good
well,
looking
appreciate
guy.
that. But for me, I didn't see myself as that. I saw
Mm.
myself as, when my wife called me, I'm like, man, this girl's fine. Why is she calling me? I mean, but it was her sister that told her to call me because she was a beautician, and my mom used to go there and get her hair done. And she just said, hey, they're having this party. And I didn't know the girl that was having the party, neither did she. But she says, hey, I know this guy. Seems to be a nice guy. Give him a call. He's got a job. He's got a car. So somebody built me up there. So
Mm-hmm.
it worked out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was, I'm the only brother-in-law left out of the sisters, So some of them have got remarried. Some are passed away, but still, for some reason, I wouldn't go away. Put it that way. I kept coming around. So
Yeah. So, when like dating your wife, did you, as you guys were dating, was it always kind of like, sunny and 70, or did you have
mm,
some hiccups?
we had hiccups. My wife was still working at her parents' store, and I went to her high school. Of course, they walked me out because they knew I didn't go there. So I had to wait for her when she came out. But I picked her up, and we went to a little place called Ojibwe Island. It was surrounded by water and stuff. It's a park. And we went there, and we were sitting on the bench by the water, and we're making out. And next thing you know, the horn's blowing. I'm like, turn around, and it's her mom. It's like, man, how'd she find us? I mean, it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something, and she's blowing the horn. Come on, you got to go to work. So I followed her to the store. I'm like, mm-mm. So yeah, yeah. It was like, no matter what, I guess she was like her number one worker, basically. She
Okay.
was a good daughter that she knew she could depend on. So, yeah. So I ended up at the store a lot, but yeah, that's how it was.
What was your favorite thing about your wife at the time?
Her energy, different, because even though I grew up with brothers, we would fight,
Mm.
and of course I was a punching bag most of the time because I was the youngest one. But they didn't take no for an answer on a lot of things.
Mm.
So they were fighters. They had to scrap for things, and it was different. So I've learned from that side along with my side, and you just put it together and make it work. But yeah, it's her energy that she has. Yeah.
Mm. Up until would you say she has the same energy up until today?
Yes. But I give well, my son, the way he's at the school, he has his mom's energy, that fight in him. I mean, I can scrap my own way, but I don't have that extra level, and that's where he gets it from. So I'm
Okay.
very proud that he has that. If he gets hurt, he fights through the pain. My wife just had surgery on her shoulder, and I hate for her to take those long drives to these other stores because I know what I see at home, what she goes through just to get out of bed. But she has that fight in her that overshadows the pain. And my son's the same way. Not that my other two aren't. My daughter, especially, as much as she's been through. But I see a lot of her and him, that fight, that spirit.
Yeah.
And you can't teach that, so.
Right, right. So some of the tell me some of the key moments of growth of your relationship. Like did you guys have any more so like how you deal with challenges?
Um,
Like what do you have a process when because you even you mentioned like earlier like even to today you guys even just kind of bicker or
mhm,
do things as we all do, right?
right.
Obviously. But do you have a system down to where how you battle these challenges?
My thing is like she tells me, I have to listen better because, she works in retail, so she has to listen to customers and upper management. She's on both ends. So I've still trying to listen better, and I'm working on it because she'll want this done, that done. She's in command mode. She wants these things done. And so that's with us. But we try to come to an agreement on how we're going to do things, how we're going to, some way, do things for our kids or grandkids in some kind of way. Not with money. It could be anything. Oh, you want to borrow the car? Okay,
Right.
but it's going to come with some rules. If we agree on that, then we're good. But she never's like, oh, I'm going to do this for this one and not tell me.
Okay.
Or I'm going to do this for him and not tell her. We talk about it, and sometimes I get talked out of things, and same with her. And but we come to an agreement.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to be a team,
Okay.
but not that everything on the chalkboard goes directly as planned, but we try our best, so.
Yeah, I think that's really important and about talking about it and having that conversation. Did you always have that growing up?
No,
Knowing how to have that conversation and being able to learn how to, I guess, negotiate, right?
well, no,
In a way.
no, my thing was, when you're growing up, I have 3 older brothers, so it's like, oh, you have to do this, you have to work, uh, you got to be the man, you take care of the family. It was, it's a pride thing, I guess. And I was doing my taxes one year, and the tax guy was like, oh, Dan, hey, Irene's she made quite a bit of money, and you made this amount. And I'm like, oh, man, it's like, she made more than me. And he goes, well, why are you upset? And I said, well, I'm the guy, I'm the man. I'm supposed to be like the breadwinner. Me, Tarzan, you, Jane. Why is she making more than me? And he goes, well, if I were you, he goes, I'd be happy. He said, if my wife could make the kind of money your wife makes, What's the problem? He said, Dan, that's a pride thing. You got to let that go. Who
Mm.
cares? It's all in the same household. But see, you grow up with sometimes that mindset that you have to do things certain way and do this and do that. So I had to let that go because I'm proud of her that she can, that she's making good money. And, I'm retired. I'm going to set amount every month, except, I get paid for my son at school. But it's a pride thing that I think most men need to, on anything, need to swallow sometimes, because as long as you're in love and you're under the same household, it all goes to the same place.
Was it hard to see that pride in you when you were younger? Do you think like you could see it but you disregarded it, or is it hard to see when you're young? What
Yeah,
would you say?
yeah, I would say, yeah, because when you're young, you can almost do anything that you want. Basically, do this, do that, and as I got older, it was like not seeing it in the same light anymore.
Mm.
So
What do you
and
say is because you have more to lose?
um,
Or is it
me-
because you've seen maybe some of the darkness?
yeah, I think it's just because you're just so used to being in the driver's seat, you're not used to being in the passenger seat.
Oh, okay.
So now it's changed. And, she doesn't like, oh, I make more than you this month, or I did more. It's not like that. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's it's a thing together where,
Would you say it's like a chain that it's kind of carried over that you kind of have to realize and break?
yeah,
Like this guy, that the tax guy that said, "Hey,
yeah,
why are you so upset?"
yeah,
It's a good
yeah,
thing.
yeah. And it's going back to the guy that gave her the compliment at the store the other day.
Mm.
Hey, I just wanted to tell you you're beautiful. I mean, I'm not going to go look for the guy and beat him up or something, but it's a compliment. It's okay. But I got guys checking you out. She sells jewelry to guys, and they're in there looking for their fiance or their girlfriends, but they see the ring on her finger and they're like, "Oh, see, you're married." She goes, "Yeah, I've been married over so many years, but are you happy?"
Mm.
They ask her, but they're in there looking for rings for their girlfriend,
Right.
but they're asking her, they're hitting on her. Why? They're trying to buy a ring for somebody else. But you see, that's why guys have to up the bar
Mm.
on what they're doing.
Mm.
But again, my dad says, just because you have her, you got to keep doing, like you mentioned, keep the flame going,
Right.
So,
Yes.
but do it in your own way. Do it whatever it takes, you know. Um, your special way, you have your own way of doing things, So keep each other happy, basically. So
Have you have to learn more about her? Like, did you like what is, because right now it sounds like you do things that she even said like, oh, you didn't put the emojis,
hmm
or how did you learn to understand her love language?
it's my thing is going back to being Mr. Cunningham, the square guy. She always calls me a nerd. Well, you're the nerd. You're this. You're that. But I like being that person because I don't want to change for you. That's how you met me.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I'm not gonna try and be somebody else. But this is me. Oh, you're corny. Where do you come
Mm.
up with this stuff? So we joke around a lot to the point of I think we have more time to breathe and have fun and joke about things. When we were younger, we didn't have that happiness. You know what I mean? I was always serious. Oh, got to get a job. Got to take care of the kids. Got to do this. It was
Always moving,
always
surviving.
right.
Yes. Oh, okay. I One key thing I think that you just said is you didn't really try, or okay, you didn't say this, but your focus wasn't more so learning on her love language. You were more so focused on how you can give her the best of you.
And that's it in a nutshell. Is
Oh,
just what you can do to
okay.
keep her not like what's the word?
Because
Interest.
if you change who you are, you're no longer
No.
yourself.
Right. I'm trying to be like this other person or this. Why can't you be like him? Or why can't you do like that? Or you're watching a movie. Oh, I wish you would talk to me this way. I mean, not everybody can do that.
Mm,
You know, I
mm,
can't sing.
mhm,
Okay. My
mhm.
brothers can sing. They play instruments. I try to sing. It's terrible. But I'll sing to her only because I know I can't. You know, it's different. You know, I said if I
Yes.
could, if I had one thing I could do, I'd be able to sing to you, but I can't. You know,
Mhm.
can't even play an instrument. So, but it's I guess the corny stuff that you tell each other. You know, um,
What you know, and that's what makes your relationship because that is so intimate. Like
yeah.
you wouldn't do that with anybody else.
No,
Like that is such
yeah,
an intimate thing. That's why that is part of that
yeah,
relationship you have.
yeah, and you know. I get where my kids are coming from because they're like, "Oh, Dad's this way. He's corny. He's this. He's that." But that's me. You guys aren't like that. I wish I could be like my three kids because they have a lot of energy, but I can see a part of me in them and my wife can see that, but I could never bring that out because I had to go to that serious moment. And now the grandkids, they're like, "Oh, Papa, he's so funny," or he's so laid back, and they're like, "Oh, you should have saw him when he was raising us. You got the good grandpa, you know." But I'm not. I don't have to be in that mode anymore because
Hmm.
it was all serious and go to school, go to work, and take care of your family. And now you can look back at all that, the journey that you've been through, to say we don't have to do this. We don't have to fight to get this. Going back to my house, the extra bedrooms and bathrooms nobody's using to the point where we only had one and two bedrooms, so you can put all that together. You put the puzzle pieces together as you get older, and when they go into place, you see things different.
Okay.
But I think it comes with maturity as you get older. But sometimes I would get mad at myself because, well, why do I got to do everything so serious? Why do I have to do this? I
Mm,
can't go hang out with my brothers because I'm doing this.
mm,
You know, it's a
mhm.
sacrifice of what you want and where you want to be. I was watching a thing on Kobe, the Muse or something it's called, Kobe, about his background,
Okay.
and he went from high school to the pros,
Hmm.
and he said he had a bad game his first time in the pros. He's throwing air balls, and he said he went in the gym and he just practiced a lot. But anyway, when he left, he saw all these college students walking across the street. He goes, did I make a mistake? Was I supposed to go to college and then go to the pros?
Mm,
I jumped from the high school to the pros. Did
mhm.
I miss out on mingling with my peers? And that was a question of, did I grow up too fast?
Mm,
I wouldn't change anything.
mm.
I'd still be with the same person because it's would have, could have, should have. If I would have done this and done that, who knows if we would be together today.
What was something you would well not you wish, but maybe something you wanted to do that you've always wanted to do?
Well, that's a good question. My thing was, well, because of my height, there's a lot of sports I can't play. But my thing was baseball. I love baseball. But I was never coached when I was a young kid.
Mm,
And I always tell the story of, told my parents, hey, we got a game at the school. And they came out, and I was like on the bad news bears. It was a bad team. But I was in the outfield, and these guys were tagging the pitcher. They're just balls everywhere. I'm flagging them down, catching, doing my thing. And I looked, and where's my parents? Like, they didn't see me catch this and die for this. And I got home, and I'm like, Mom, Dad, why'd you guys leave? And they said, we couldn't take it. Isn't there a mercy rule? You guys were getting killed. I'm like, I don't care about that. I wanted you to see me do my thing out there,
mhm.
So that was for me, is to
That showed you
yeah,
something.
yeah. So when my kids got old enough, when Danny got old enough,
Mhm.
I was taking him across. I was like going from Arlington to Grand Prairie for him to play baseball.
Mm.
You know, it, our town, our little township didn't have a little league, so I had to take him to another city to play. Yeah, so that's how I wanted to give
And
him
you
that time.
understood the value
Yeah,
of taking the time to doing
yeah,
that
yeah.
because of your own
Yeah,
experience.
even when he wrestled in high school, if anybody knows, you don't compete right after each other. You know, have a match and then have another. You got to wait.
Mm.
And I'm sitting on that bench, those bleachers, for hours until he has another match. So I've been through his journey on his stuff, but I wasn't going to leave. Like,
Mm.
I'm going to sit here as long as I have to be with you, good or
Regardless
bad.
of the outcome,
Oh yeah,
you're going to be there
yeah,
for the for for them really, not for the outcome.
yeah. We were in Michigan, and he was doing jujitsu here
Mm.
already, and still at General Motors, and we flew in for a match, and he he lost in the first round. So I'm thinking, okay, round robin, he's going to have another match or something. I didn't understand how it worked, and I leaned over to my wife and I said, he's all done. And he's sitting over there off to the side, like having his moment of what just happened in the match. And we didn't go talk to him because, you know, you got to have your space. But I'm like, we flew all the way here for that? I mean, just one match? But it was the point that we flew in to
Mhm.
watch him, win or lose.
Mhm.
I just didn't understand how everything worked, you know. But the point is, we flew in
Yes.
from Michigan to come see him have a match.
Mhm.
So,
That says a lot. That
yeah,
says a lot. And I mean, I can relate a little bit of there, and I'm sure a lot of athletes for in whatever spectrum and in that way and where they are, I think we all can relate in how important or how I mean, really how important just having that support there doesn't
right.
matter how important or
Yeah,
not important the game is, right? That whether you're in junior high, high school, or you're in the big leagues.
yeah,
Like it's all important that support. It's it goes bigger, I think. Even just thinking as an athlete playing sports when you're young, how meaningful having that support is. And nobody talks about it,
exactly.
right? Because it's
Right,
not like you're young and you're a
right,
teen, and it's not like, oh yes, we don't really know how to communicate in the sense of saying thanks, mom, for being there. Maybe not a lot of us, right? But I don't think it's something that's really talked about. It's either you have a
right.
supportive family, or maybe you don't have as a supportive family when it comes to social events, when it takes time away from your everyday life, right?
Yes, and I agree with that because it's not the outcome what happens. It's just when you look to see one of your relatives or a friend giving you support, that means a lot, you know. So um, you kind of learn those things
Mm,
that those have value,
mm,
you know. That's real
mm-hmm.
big. You can't put a price on somebody coming out to see you do your thing, whether you have a bad day or not. It's just the support, and it goes back to when we got married. We got married at the courthouse. 10 minutes, it was over. Boom. My parents, nobody on my side came. But my whole point is, when we had our 25th, I had my family in it, my grandkids. Danielle was a flower girl. My grandson was the ring bearer. I mean, her dad walked her down the aisle. I mean, it's that support that you get, and it's kind of the same thing. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? So,
For sure, it
yeah,
just shows in different scenarios in our
right,
life.
yeah.
So was your father, I mean, other than maybe walking away that one time, was he for the most part mostly supportive, or did it kind of vary?
Yeah, it took time because I think on both sides they had to see if we were going to stick it out, we were
Oh,
going to be
okay.
together. You know, the odds are against you. You know, and it's a matter of um, what what do you young people want? You
Hmm.
know, are you just playing house? Are you going to be a family? Are you going to?
And so all this knowledge you're downloading in your head, is it is it mostly by observation in the people maybe you looked up to, or did you read any books maybe, or did you have a mentor, or
It's kind of
did you have maybe another person close to you that you learned from?
yeah. I would just say the family, um, and you learn from your older siblings on what happens. I have two brothers. They got divorced, remarried, and I'm like, why don't they use a recipe that my parents gave us?
Mm.
But everybody's different. It's how you download the advice. And
And what you download,
right,
right?
yeah. So we were watching when the movie The Notebook,
Mm-hmm.
when that came out. Didn't know what it was about. Two young people in love. One parent didn't want the other one being with this one, and me and my wife looked at each other and like, man, that's our life story right there,
Mm.
you know? And, corny, everybody has a movie they can relate to, but that's probably, you know,
For you.
for us. Yeah. She goes, oh, if something happens to me, I want you to, do this, do that. And I'm like, no, we're going to be at the same time. I mean, whatever it takes, whenever the time is, it's us, I don't want to get real corny, but people say they're your soulmate.
Mm-hmm.
That's us because we fight, we argue, but that's what I like about her,
Mm.
that spirit about her.
Mm.
And I tell her that to kind of calm her down sometimes. Ooh, I like when you yell at me.
Mm.
It's just like, ooh, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, don't talk to me. I'm mad at you. But I'm trying to keep the calm within the storm, basically.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I bet in some sense, I bet she likes that in some sense too.
Oh, yeah.
That
Oh,
you're kind of like, because we all need that
yeah.
balance, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like music. Now, my dad, he played the guitar and he loves to sing. And my two older brothers, they play music. They played in bands and stuff. And I grew up around music. So me, I like the love songs.
Mm.
And oh, why you gotta play that? You got Well, I like the I grew up in Michigan, so we like Motown stuff. That's what I grew up with. But when you get to the love songs that's telling you about being with this person or that person, I relate to that because that's how I want to be with my wife to do things. You know what I mean? So yeah, you can hear the other rap. Oh, I hit her. I did this. I mean, that's not me. I
Mm-hmm.
like different kind of music. Don't get me wrong. My son grew up during the rap music,
Mm-hmm.
and it took a little use to get used to. But I embraced it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's different. So as long as it has a beat and it has lyrics, I'm good. But certain songs just resonate with you. So it's like they know what you're thinking. Man, that's me. I love that song because they're talking about what's inside of me, what I wish I could do. So
Yes, I like how you said you embraced it, because I feel like maybe that is one of the issues as humans, is that we try to fight everything, and we just put so much resistance and so many walls that are harder to break, which at the end of the day, those walls kind of create chaos and maybe stress in the
yes,
environment. And then stress kind of carries over, and there's other people that have to deal with the stress or your stress. And maybe, it just kind of has a negative ripple effect, I feel like. And so, that's what you said. I embraced it. And I just that I think that is so key. I mean, I hear it and it makes so much sense. Like, it's, you embrace it. It's like, what else are you gonna do?
right. And it's like
Fight it, right?
yes,
Like,
when I transferred to General Motors here, I was out of my norm here because it's just different. I'm not uh, 18 when I moved here, young. Not that I was old, but I was like, oh, this ain't for me.
mm,
These vehicles are moving because I worked assembly. They're coming down like a train. Here
mm,
comes one. Here comes one, and I had to embrace it because it took me about a good year before I was in my happy place here. And It's like, why am I fighting it? I'm not moving back. I gotta. And I had a supervisor that didn't care for me, and no matter where I moved to a different department, he became my foreman. So it's like, man, I can't get away from this guy. But I just embraced it and did the best I could. I would say a little devotional from my house to the GM plant. And normally it was a short one, but then I started saying more things and being thankful for more things. And
Mm.
here I'm in the parking lot at GM and I'm still with my devotional. That got me through the day because no matter what I had to put up with, I was already talking to God, like, hey, let me have a good day. Let this, you know, don't let me get hurt or whatever. Take care of my family. It just kept going on and on. So you gotta be in that mindset to take you to a different place, so you can embrace it to the point of it's got to work. You don't have a choice. So make it good while you're there. Um, my thing was I would have a vehicle. I worked on top where they would put the luggage racks on top, and they would just come out of paint and they would I was the first line. They would come into the assembly. And there was a vehicle one time, it was a Cadillac, and it was burgundy. And it was, when you get a can of paint and it runs out of paint, it
Mhm.
shoots spots all over.
Mhm.
That's what it looked like. It was half burgundy and half white. So I stopped the line, and they don't want you to do that. They want the production going. So my team leader, he comes over. Alvarez, what's the problem? You don't have to be blind to see it. Half the car is two different colors. We need to start the lineup and write on the ticket what's wrong. I'm like, no, don't start the lineup. Somebody needs to come and see this. So here comes the foreman. And he comes over and, well, Alvarez, what's the problem? Take a look, two different colors. Well, let's run the line. And then the supervisor, or the general manager, they call him, came, his boss, super. And she is a lady. She pulls me over. She goes, Dan, you did the right thing. I said, well, they shouldn't be coming out of paint like that. How many more are coming? So the supervisor from paint, he comes over to my station and he gets out the handbook that we have there and he's trying to find protocol. Like, why am I stopping the line? I'm like, you're trying to find a problem with what I'm doing now. This shouldn't have got here. You're not doing your job. You're trying to
Mhm.
find a fault with me. So she pulled me over to the side and said, you did the right thing. How many more are we going to get?
They just probably didn't like that you pointed it out.
Yeah. Well, but my thing is, there's only 4 people that see the top of the
Yes.
vehicle. I'm up on a like a giant pedestal, and it goes around the line, and then there's 2 other guys that put their carrier on top, and that's it. Nobody else is gonna
Look at it.
look at it. So if you don't catch it now, it's gonna go out the door. So my thing is, I'm gonna give you 100%. Why I'm there? I might have a supervisor that don't like me, but I'm not here for you. You don't pay my salary. You
Mm.
don't pay me. General Motors. I'm here to do the job. And if the guy next to me don't want to do his, I have no control. I only
Mhm.
have control over what's in front of me. And that's kind of through life.
Where did you learn that? To just kind of like, hey, I have no control, kind of let go.
Mm.
I have no control over you. I have control over me.
Well, I think a lot of it, like my my dad, he worked
Mm.
at General Motors,
Wow.
and we have discussions now, and you would think things have changed, but they haven't. I can tell him stories. He goes, "Well, that's the same way it happened with me." It's a lot of it is norm, but he always told me, "Give them 100%. Do your
Mm.
job. That's what you're getting paid for." Some guys, oh man, I got thrown out last week. I got 3 days off of work. I don't care about this. They have that mentality that they don't want to do their job. But apparently, you got thrown out for a good reason. Don't take it out on your job.
Okay.
That's what pays us. That's what takes care of putting food on the table. You have to
Hmm.
have that different mindset. You can't always do that. Don't get me wrong, but you have to put things in perspective to the where it makes sense, not just one sided where you're angry. You know.
Yes, I think a lot of that has like a lot of to get to that point, you have to accept responsibility. Um and I guess you can teach it. I mean, or you're just natural at it because everything kind of goes back to how you were raised. Um and maybe what you saw, but it's also how you took it in because your brothers also were or at least one of them was raised in the same household.
Hmm.
And it sounds like you guys turn out to be a little bit different.
Yes, I mean we still have the values of like my third oldest brother. We're 2 years apart, and I said, "Well, don't you remember Dad telling you this? It's your money until you let go of it. In other words, don't buy the first thing you see. Shop around, and maybe you can buy two instead of one."
Mm,
But that was his thing, and I don't remember Dad telling me that. There's probably a lot of things I don't remember, but when
you
you're in
paid
the
attention.
yeah, when you're in the trenches, it starts to resonate, the advice. It's
Mm,
like Coach, my son. He's after every class, he don't just say, "Hey, bye, see you tomorrow." He always has a mat chat. He always gives a little advice about something. And there might be 40 of you lined up next to each other. And to 20 people, it might not even pertain to them, but 20 other ones, God, he's talking to me. I'm going to go home and try that, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that.
right.
So the advice is free. You just got to retain it, you know?
You got to retain it. And I guess for some people also, you have to be looking for it because sometimes it can be in front of you and you may not see it because maybe, I don't know, for whatever reason, I suppose, right? Because even you just mentioned like your dad would give you both advice, you remember it, some of it, maybe he doesn't, which it just kind of shows how where your mindset is very important because I think that applies maybe the same to even opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Because you may have an opportunity or somebody else may even see that opportunity for you or for someone, but if that person is not in the right mindset, um it might be easy to miss out.
Yeah. I had a guy, so with General Motors, they have, we have representatives in the union. So it's kind of like an attorney. They represent you if something happens. And they called me off my job, and supervisor and the union rep is in the office, and they're like, "Alvarez, we need to talk to you about your work ethic." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" Like, "Well, you've been missing work here and there." And this was when I was in my 20s.
Mm.
And I said, "What do you mean?" I was being real cocky. I get my wallet out, pull out my pay stub, and I'm like, "I'm making good money." Because you would make it on overtime.
Mm.
You could miss 2 days and still work overtime, get time and a half, whatnot. But that's not what they were getting at. They were just saying, "Hey, you're missing work during the week. And yeah, you're working overtime, but we need you here during the regular hours, basically." So I went outside and I'm on my break and I'm talking to one of the older guys there. And I'm venting to him of what they just told me about, basically coming to work. He says, "Alvarez," he goes, "you're talking about your integrity." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Yeah, just do your 40 hours."
Integrity.
He goes, "That's what you have on them. If you come to work every day, do your 40 hours. If you want to do overtime, do it. If you don't do it. You don't have to work." And I'm looking at him and I'm like, "Well, God, so much for you being on my side." But he is agreeing with them, but he's telling me in a different way than they are. He's saying, "Just come to work. If you ever get in trouble down the line, you always could go back on your work record because that's your integrity."
Mm.
Well, and that happened to me. I get here, and my supervisor was what they call, you call it an AR, you're an extra person. So the three of us are on the job, and me and you are extra. And Alvarez, I got to send you to another department because they're short. I'm okay in my department. Everybody came to work. So, okay, I would go out, and I kind of liked it. You did different jobs that you weren't used to. It made the day go by quicker. But then one day I had in our department, three of us were extra. It was two guys, me and the other guy and a girl. And either "Alvarez, go wait over there, they're going to come get you." I said, "I'm not leaving." He says, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I got right to job assignment. I can tell you where to go." I said, "That's true. Call me a committee man." So he does. And the guy comes, he's younger, like in his 20s, 30 maybe. And I said, "Look," he said, "Alvarez, what's the problem?" I said, "Look, if I'm the only one in the department, I got to go. I get that. But no matter what, he always sends me out. There's 2 other ones. Why did he rotate us and keep me in the department for one? And I said, look, whatever you do, don't agree with him. If you think that I'm wrong, tell me when we walk out. Don't let him gloat and say, oh, yeah, he was right, blah, blah, blah. He said, well, what else do you need from me? I said, I come to work every day. I do my job. I don't leave early. I don't come in late. I'm here every day. So going back to that talk that guy gave me, it's your integrity. So we get in the office and he talks to, the guy's name was Kerry. He said, Kerry, what's the problem you're having with Dan over here? And he goes, well, I told him that he had to leave the department and he refused to go. I have right to job assignment. He goes, that's true, but you have 2 other extra people in your department. Why didn't you send them? He says, what's the problem with Alvarez here? Does he come to work late? Does he miss work? No, actually, he's a good worker. He goes, then what's the problem? Well, because I told him he had to go, he didn't want to go. But he says, Kerry, you have 2 other guys, 2 other people here. Send them out. Has Alvarez ever refused to go when you told him? He goes, no. Then what's the problem? You see? So that came into play. So you're always learning. And I learned the hard way. I was being cocky in my 20s, but now when you get older, okay, you're right. It's your integrity. Come to work because that's what you have to work with. Whenever, and he didn't say anything after that. So
It's like your credit score today,
yeah,
right? Like your integrity wherever you are, how you present yourself in whatever scenario, especially in a work scenario, because if it's your job, I mean, it's your job. And if you have to go there, you have to go there every day. And you may spend more time in your job than you do at home. So having integrity, like knowing what you're worth, right? At the end of
right.
the day, it's like, you know, your worth. And it reminds me because my brother, he is 17 and he started working at Texas Roadhouse.
Mm-hmm.
I think like cleaning the tables. And well, it turns out as most places nowadays are short staffed. So, he's 17, he's a junior in high school. And apparently they've asked him if he can like basically work other areas within that place, and he's done them all and they do such a good job. And apparently, from what I hear, because my older sister, she also works there. And so long story short, he's taking on these other responsibilities. He even said some people that just are, their job is to clean the table, they will right out say no. For him, he was so mind blown. He's like, Myra, they'll say no, I'm not gonna do it. And that's their job.
Right.
You're right. And so he was so surprised, which I thought it was really cute. But anyways, he fast forward now, he went to his manager and he asked for a raise. He said, look, every time you call me in, I come in. I'm here. I do my job. I do other jobs that he fills in other positions that he's learned, so he has more skill. And without hesitation, his manager said, "All right, we'll give you a raise."
But see, that's another thing too, is he was able to confront at 17 his manager and say, hey, I see things and I think I'm going to fight for myself and say, hey, because you're not
He said,
telling
"I'm
me.
worth more."
Yes. And that's that, you can't teach that, but you can be told that, but to do it is a different thing. And he's doing it. So maybe you might have told him, hey, do the best job you can do when you're there, whatever. But he's got eyes also, and he's seeing everybody just slacking off,
Right.
getting paid what he's getting paid, but they're telling the boss no. Well, you know what?
Right.
What do I got to lose? I'm going to ask for a raise. You tell me no. Okay. And not that I'm going to be a bad worker after that, but you
I
never
might find
know.
myself some other place. Well, you never know, right? At
Right.
that point, it's kind of like and he knew. And sometimes when there's a sense of like security that comes across that you can feel, maybe that helps
Yeah.
because Like, even when he told me, he was like, "Oh, it was." I think in his head was kind of like it was obvious, right?
Right.
For me, looking at it from as like an outsider, I'm like, hey, like inside me, I'm like so proud,
Hmm.
right? And I'm like, oh, good job, buddy. Like,
Yeah.
like encouraging him and just telling him how
That's
impressive I am, but like deep down, I'm like, wow, like
yeah.
that's
Yeah, that's deep because in a perfect world, they'll come up. Guess what? They gave me more money because I'm doing a good job, but he had to present what he was doing to get that. Yeah.
right,
So,
right. It's like he built kind of like a case, and so it sounds similar to kind of like you're sort of like you realized you had value, like like you were worth more than what maybe how you were being treated, and how you went about that particular scenario. It's very mature, because it's not like, oh, you didn't like just kind of toss your hands up and like kind of let it out here.
right.
I'm this and that. No, it's like how you handled it. It's I think that's what's most
Yeah.
important.
Well, it goes back to that devotional I would do on the way to work.
Mm.
I needed that peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I had another scenario where the line they start at 6 a.m. And here I go. I hit the button. I'm trying to drink my coffee, do my job. And here I go. I shut the line down. And my supervisor just happened to be in a wheelchair. He rolls up there and, Alvarez, why you stopping my line? And I'm like, well, all the center consoles, where you shift and everything, put all your stuff in, that's the
Mm.
center console. They were off online. They were all crooked. And I said, you got to have somebody walk the line back, put them back where they belong so I can put the front seat in. I was dropping the front seat in, but I can't do that if they're not lined up. Well, then he says, well, the guy on second shift didn't have that problem. And I said, well, this ain't second shift, and I'm not going to do two jobs. And I said, you get that they call them team leaders. He's got to walk 20 cars back to where the guys actually put them on. I said, I only have maybe one a month, if that, offline. I'm not going to complain about that. But when I get every single one that's just dropped in there and not lined up, I'm not going to do two jobs. And he's trying to tell me the guy on second shift was fixing them. I'm like, no, they're not paying me. The guy over there should be doing his job right, correctly, and we won't have this conversation. You see, but the thing is, how they say, don't take my kindness for a weakness. They don't see Alvarez as this manly guy that, blah, blah, blah. But when the time push comes to shove, I'm going to let you know, you know.
Let's say you choose your battles.
Yes, there you go. So, I mean,
That's a wise
I
man.
never, hardly ever call the committee man. I mean, I don't have to do your job, but you always get somebody that thinks you're not, then you have to put them in your place. So,
But how you did it, it's actually very impressive, because I think that's a lot of times when kind of things kind of break and chaos happens,
yeah,
it's maybe that process of how to handle it, because it's easy to lose control
yeah,
and raise your voice. I mean, tell me about it, right?
yeah, right,
And just kind of to try to get to some outcome now, versus just being patient and methodical. Well, not more so methodical, just and maybe it's just kind of being respectful of everyone, because you treat everyone with respect. It sounds like doesn't matter maybe how they're making you feel or what their intentions are.
right,
It's so maybe that's a good um like a fundamental value, which is like the
yeah,
respect, and it pays off, and it shows in many different ways, even when it's like not obvious that it's respect, like
right,
such as the way you handle those type of situations, especially when you have to deal with somebody that has seniority over
right.
you.
And that was the thing was my parents, they raise you, don't talk back to your elders, don't do this. I mean, that he thought that's the way it was supposed to be. And then you have people taking advantage of you. And on my wife's
Mm,
side of the family, they don't. You're not going to talk to me that way. You're going to, they fight for themselves. That's the
Mhm.
part I've learned.
Okay.
And so another scenario, I'm at on my job, and I have the they call them job setters in Michigan. He comes up to me, and I'm doing my job, and he's screaming in my ear, and he's trying to like belittle me. They'll do that if you let them. So he's talking to me, and I'm trying to work at the same time, but yet he's barking in my ear. So I shut the line off. I turn around like, hey, you want to talk? Let's talk. Oh, you can't shut the line down. I'm like, well, then get me a break. Get me somebody here to take my job. Let's go in the office and talk about what's on your chest, because apparently you're upset. But I can't retaliate because I'm still doing my job.
Mhm.
And I've learned that to the point of, you're not going to talk to me that. You're not going to talk down to me. You want to talk, let's talk civilized. You're grown, I'm a grown man. Get me off the line and we'll go talk about it. I shut the line off. He changed his attitude. Like, well, we're losing parts here. And I'm like, well, yeah, because you don't want to talk to me the right way. But that's what I had to do, is start fighting for myself, to let people know, not with a chip on my shoulder, but talk to me the right way and we can have a conversation.
Respectfully.
Right. Yeah. So
Like adults.
I had to grow up to learn that, because I was easy go lucky. Like, oh, yeah, okay, you said to do this, do that. I didn't fight for myself, basically.
Would you how did you see that? When was the aha moment, like I need to start standing up for myself? Cuz it sounds like you picked it up from your family side. Did you pick it up specifically from your wife?
The
Did she
wife side.
encourage you?
Yeah. Well, and this is a mistake I made in high school, because when I moved out of the house, I was a junior in high school, and
Mm.
I talked to my teachers and I said, look, I can only make it on Fridays. I don't have a vehicle anymore, but I can get a ride to do the test. As long as I have my books, I can study on what chapter we're going to have a test on. And I talked to the one teacher, and he says, yeah, you're Alvarez, you're fine. And I was getting A's on my tests. Okay. And then I think I failed maybe one. And then he calls me up to the desk and he gives me my grade. And I look, and big red E, like, you failed this class. I'm like, well, hey, I talked to you about, my situation, but I'm passing all my tests. He goes, yeah, but it's not fair to the other students that are here every day, and you only come on Fridays
Mm.
and take the test. Yeah, you're passing them, but it's not fair to them. So, straw that broke the camel's back, I walked out of high school. When I should have went to the counselor's office, talked to them. So fast forward, I ran into the counselor later on, and she says, Dan, what happened to you? You just fell off the grid. And I'm like, well, I told her what happened with the teachers, and they didn't pass me. And she goes, well, all you had to do was come talk to us. See, you don't know what you don't know. And that's my thing now, is I'm going to confront why this is happening. There's got to be a story behind whatever's happening here. So that's my thing now. And I tell my kids that, my grandkids, don't take no for an answer. You go in there and fight. You make another call. Yeah, but I did what you said to do. I said, sometimes you got to fight more, So
That reminds me of, I guess, the way I see tackling problems, and it sounds very familiar to what you're talking about right now, which is you kind of want to slay the dragon by its head,
mm,
by like the main head, because the dragon's gonna have many heads, and every different head, it's a problem, right? And so when you slay one of the heads, it grows back because there's a source behind that head that's regenerating that head again, which is a problem. Maybe you put a band-aid on that problem because you don't really get rid of it. You don't get rid of
right,
the source. You put a band-aid on it, and then it grows again, and then here it comes again, and you're like, oh,
right,
it comes back in some other form until you you go and figure out where the source is and then slay that. That's how you get rid just by doing that gets rid of these other problems you didn't even have to
Right.
tackle,
Yeah.
right? You didn't even have to touch them. You go straight to the source. And to me, it sounds like you learned
I've
to keep looking for the source.
this journey is, if I'm going to be a good parent and be good at it, I have to fight these. There's always going to be an obstacle, and how are you going to approach it? You know, um, you had mentioned when we left Detroit and I got in at steering gear, it wasn't that easy. They made you take a physical. So took a physical. They check your eyes and take your blood pressure, check your lungs, take your blood. And I took my eye test and I left my glasses in Detroit. And I said, Mr. Alvarez, you're not going to be able to get hired in unless you pass your eye test. So I called my parents, and they lived down the road from the plant. And I had them bring my brother's glasses. I couldn't see out of those. So there was we were in line, like being in the military, you're in line to take all this, go in these different rooms. And I asked the guy in front of me, I said, hey, let me see your glasses. He gives them to me. I thought I was on stilts because when you look down, felt like I was on the third floor or something, but I could see close. And I said, hey, I want to borrow your glasses. I got to retake my eye exam. He, knock yourself out. So I go in there, I pass that. And I said, I need this job. Going back to my son, I want that Blue Cross card. I want that insurance. I need this job. So anyway, everything was going great. And then they said, Mr. Alvarez, we can't pass you any further because we hear like a heart murmur. I'm like, what? Yeah, you got like a hole in your heart or something irregular. You got to go see your family doctor. This was like September 1st of 1976. So anyway, I go see my doctor. He puts me in the hospital for 2 weeks. I had to wear like an EKG, a cassette recorder on my hip, and it monitored my
heart,
heart.
Your heartbeat.
And they put me on a treadmill, and I'm running that. And they had a poster in front of me, and all I did was lock eyes with that poster. And I need this job. I need this job. I need this job. I'm not going to get off because if I tell them I'm tired or I need to get off, I'm not going to get the job. So they had to have 2 nurses help me get off. I was like, dizzy. And they said, I'll lay here for a while, cool off. To another 2 weeks, I get my report saying that I'm okay. Nothing wrong with my heart. So I take it back to the plant, give them my paperwork. No phone call, no nothing. And it's October now. Before it was September, early month of September. Now it's middle of October. And I had to go back to Detroit to see if I had a job still. I'm waiting for that phone call. And I'm like, I don't know. I guess I need to go back because I'm going to be without a job. And that's my dad told me. He says, well, maybe you need to go up there. Find out why they haven't called you. So I go up there with my wife, and I'm at the counter. And the girl says, may I help you? I said, yeah, I need to see Mr. Farrell. And what's this about? And I'm like, my job application. So he comes out. This is the guy that interviewed me. And because when he interviewed me, I had a goatee, had long hair like the Beatles, And he says, if you want this job, got to cut the hair. Said that goatee, got to go. Whatever it takes, I'll shave my head to get the job. This is when he interviewed me. So then when we're taking our physicals, there was guys with long hair down to their shoulders. I'm like, this guy's just putting me through he's just wants to see how bad I want this job. So anyway, I go back and see him. I have my wife with me. And he comes out and he says, what can I do for you? I said, Mr. Farrell, I need to talk to you. Give me 5 minutes. And he's in the doorway and he goes like this, looks at his watch. He goes, you got 5 minutes. He didn't say, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Alvarez, come in the office. What do you need to talk about? So I'm practically begging for the job on my hands and knees in front of my wife, telling him, look, You had me cut my hair, had had me cut my goatee, no problem. You say there's something wrong with my heart. I come back with a clean bill of health, and I still haven't got the job yet. So he medical was right there. He goes back, he gets the file, and he's looking, he's flipping papers. Well, everything seems to be in order, but like I said before, we don't promise you a job. That was like on a Monday. They called me on Saturday. But if I wouldn't have went back in there, I wouldn't be where I'm at now.
Right.
But again, you have to fight. Some things aren't a given. Sometimes you got to go that extra mile to get what you want and fight for it, because nobody's going to, in a perfect world, everything goes smooth, you know? And I always would like, man, I should have hired in a month and a half ago, but I couldn't look at it that way. I'm just blessed to be in here. I got what I wanted, but how bad God's telling me, how bad did you want this job? Let's see how bad you want it. You saying it, but that's the only way I can look at it. So yes, I'm blessed to be in here. I'm retired and they're still taking care of me. I still have all my benefits, so nothing to cry about. But I had to fight for that. Getting back to Danny, when he got in there, guy gives me an application. I've never won anything. Never. He comes in the break area and he goes, everybody says, what you got in that envelope? They thought it was to work in the yard, cutting grass or some easy job. He goes, no, it's a job application for the summer. He said, but most of my kids work at Dow Chemical. They have good jobs. I don't need it. And my buddy goes, well, hey, Dan's been trying to get his son in here. He said, Dan, I'll come see you in a little bit. So I'm working on my job. This is in Michigan. And he said, come with me. I said, Mark, I'm going to the other department. He reaches in his pocket, gets a quarter out, and he told his other friend, his best friend, about the application too. He goes, well, I told both of you, you can flip for it. I said, Jim, you call the flip because he told you first about the application. He flipped that coin, came up tails. I already had the application. I was like excited. I finally won something. I get home and I tell Dan, he was going to a small community college. I said, application, you can work there for the summer. He started doing the moonwalk on me. He started walking backwards like, Dad, you and Grandpa working there? I don't want to work in there. It's just for the summer. Fill it out. You'll be working. That easy. So he filled it out. And I was in the break area and this lady's talking about her son got in. And I'm like, well, my son put his application before her, and he's been working 3 weeks already. I said, Dan, you got to go in there and check on your application because this other lady's son's working already, and you had yours. Like, Dad, I did what you told me to do. I filled it out. I did my part. I said, sometimes you have to do more. So I went in there, and the lady had applications on her desk everywhere. And she said, sir, can I help you? I said, yeah, I'm kind of wondering why my son hasn't got called yet. He filled out the application, took his physical. I said, what's his name? I said, Danny Alvarez. So she's looking in all the drawers. It was right on her desk. Opens the file. Let me make a call. She calls Pinnacle, and she goes, well, I have everything. I got Mr. Alvarez here, and is wondering why his son hasn't got hired yet. I have all this information, but I don't have his medical record. Oh, that's what happened. She says, fax that to me right now. She hung up. Mr. Alvarez, I apologize. I don't have his medical record. That's why we haven't called him yet. She gets a piece of paper and writes her personal phone number. Call me if he isn't hired within a week. Before a week, bam, he gets the call. He's working from April, and he's only supposed to work the summer till September. And they all go back to college, school. He worked all the way to December. And they let him go. And come February, I think, the next year, they called him. Mr. Alvarez, we want to hire you, and we'll backdate your seniority to October since you worked for us so long, of 97. So he already had seniority by the time he walked in the door. But my whole point is, all you have to do is go back and check on things, because don't let things be the way they are. You might have to do a little investigating yourself. I went through that, so I knew. And he hadn't gone through that, but he knows now. Sometimes you have to push the envelope a little more. So, yeah.
That's a huge lesson, not just for your son at the time then now, but even now, like even just for me, because I feel like that's often a conversations we have within ourselves, like, um, should I try again,
Mhm.
or should I give up? And
Yeah.
I think a lot of times maybe the conversation, oh, well, maybe I'm not good enough, or whatever that
Right.
conversation goes, or I'll just try something else instead of, like you said, pushing the envelope,
Mhm.
trying more. Like some things just require a little bit more. And it really makes a lot of sense because a lot of the great things you see that have happened throughout life, whether you look it up in YouTube or
Mhm.
just wherever, um, or even like you mentioned earlier, like Kobe, right?
Mhm.
Like he said, you went to the NBA and he was throwing air shots, he was shooting air balls.
Mhm.
Um, and so he had to go. I have listened to his story, and he said he had to go back and do things to get where he needed to be, and that is kind of similar to you saying like you had to go back and do things you needed to do to keep pushing, to push the
Right.
envelope. um and I'm just so grateful. I'm like listening to that right now because a lot of things
Yeah.
make sense.
Yeah. And to me, it has a common denominator is my son.
Mm,
If it was just me trying to get in there by myself, being single,
mm,
young, I
yeah.
probably wouldn't have fought to go back. But I had a reason.
You had a big why.
Yes, and that was it. I mean, I can't put enough on
Mm,
uh, my son making me fight for things,
mm,
not just for him, but for me. But it it fell into place because getting back to Dad, I wasn't a mistake. No, no, you weren't. He helped me grow.
mm,
I
mhm.
can't speak for my wife. She has her stories,
Right.
but he's and now it's come full circle. I work for him now. And I used to have dreams that he was going to fire me. I'm like, man, you can't get fired by your son. I did, you know, and that's how it was. And but now I embraced it, and I've learned to do the things that he wants me to do. And it is, how they say you're the um, how's that go? You know all these jobs, but master of none. How's that go?
Um,
You know all these jobs, but you're not good at just one. That's me. When
yeah.
somebody gets sick in the bathroom, I gotta go clean it up, or do this, or do that, but that is probably my why I am the way I am because of him. I can't put enough on that.
Do you, with working hard and always kind of doing the best thing you can do, um it sounds to me more of a like an optimistic mindset because you've kind of like embraced things as they come and you do what you can and you've learned to fight for what you've got. um do you did you have to deal with any tox toxic people around you?
Yes, yes. You how they say you have your haters. Oh, you got this, you have that, but I had to. It wasn't a give me. I was talking to one of the students at the school a long time ago, and he told me the story of, yeah, he's visiting his girlfriend. The neighbor comes out, worked at General Motors. He says, hey, young man, how'd you like to work at General Motors? He goes, what? He goes, yeah, I got an application. I don't need it. Fill it out. You'll be working. I mean, he just got handed the lottery. And the way I went through it, I didn't go through that.
Mm,
But everybody's life is different. Now, whether he learned values once he got in there or how he got the application. But I'm scratching my head. I'm like, that was too easy. I had to go back in there. I had to go to the hospital. I mean, but everything is
mhm.
for a life lesson. Going back to my parents, is
Yeah.
always a life lesson on whatever you're doing. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And I said, Dad, I don't want to hear the talk, but I give talks. You can ask all my kids, Dad. They don't ask me for nothing because they know there's something attached to it, and that's what I have to give. I can't leave all kind of money for them, but I'm gonna give you what my dad gives me. You can't put a price on
The
it.
legacy.
Yeah, that's the advice. But you had asked me a question earlier. What would I like to do? I think I said sports stuff, but Back in the 80s, we got laid off. My credit got bad.
Mm.
And I tell everybody, I'm like, your mailbox is full. I'm like, well, I'm not going to go check the mail. I know what's in there, bills. I can't pay them. I'm not working. I was off over a year and a half from General Motors. And all I had to do was call the companies and say, hey, I'm laid off. Can you do this or take this money?
Mm.
Again, that mindset, I just blocked it out, didn't take care of it. And I finally figured out how to budget, take care of my money. And if you take care of your money, your credit score, you mentioned that, your credit score goes up. And I'm big on that. That's my thing. I wish I could make an app to just show young people how to take care of their money, because when I was in high school, they gave you a newspaper, go to the business section, go to the back of the page, and we're going to pick out stocks. Well, what is that? Well, you got to pick stocks. We're going to make money. But they didn't show you how to make the money. They were showing you how to spend the money.
Mm.
And that's my thing. This what I try to show the young people, a formula of how to budget your money. And with my son, he's real good at it. He embraced it. I got him a credit card when he was in high school, and all my coworkers, are you crazy? Why would you give your kid a credit card? I'm like, because I want him to control the card, not the card to control him. And he's just buying stuff and not paying things. And excuse me, to this day, he doesn't like to have a bill. He'll pays it off. So I've helped young people at the plant. And of course, a lot of people don't want to hear about their credit. They won't talk about it. So
They might be in that phase when you didn't want to look at your mailbox.
same thing. But I know now I don't give up on them. I'll ask them again, or ask them, hey, how you doing on your budget or something. After a while, you don't get a response, you let it go. But I'm not going to give up on you, especially if you ask me for information. So
Did you learn? We obviously don't learn finances in school. Um, how did you have a good like credit score leading up until like you lost your job? Like, did you know that was important, or did
uh,
you
it,
just kind of realize it was important after it kind of took a hit?
it took a hit then, because you take it for granted,
Okay.
And that was the thing is, now I have to do something. How am I going to be able to buy things? Or if my kids need a breathing machine or something out, I can't, you want to be able to put a credit card and pay for it. And that was my thing, was I got to teach myself I used to put money in envelopes, and it goes back to the paper route. We used to have a book, and I'd go to your house, and if you paid, I'd mark you paid. If you didn't pay, or if you paid me for the whole month, I'd have to put 3 weeks of your payment in jars. And that's where it kind of came from, is we had to track everything. And I started putting things in envelopes, but that got old after a while. And I went to the credit union one day, and she had a little plastic flyer on the counter, and rainy day account, vacation account, had all these different accounts you could open up. And I said, I don't need one of those. I just need a place to put my money. Because normally they just had checking, savings, and that was it. And I said, I need a place to put my money. She goes, oh, you can open up one of these and just name it whatever you want. That's just what we call it. If you want a vacation account, the light bulb went off. And so I wrote down all my bills I had to do, and I got paid weekly. So I put the month, I had 3 columns. I wrote all my bills. On the right side, I wrote what I paid a month, got a calculator, divided everything by 4. And the middle column was my budget after you add that up. So when I got paid, they thought I was crazy. I went in there and I gave them my sheet. I want to open all these accounts. They're like, you got like 10 accounts. And I said, yeah, they were all checking accounts, but they were off your main checking. And you disperse the money in there. And you can name them what you want. Mayra's ABJJ account, Mayra's cell phone.
Okay.
It was good. I didn't have to do the envelopes no more. And
Did that save you time?
yes, it was like having your own personal CPA taking care of your money, but the bank was doing it for you. Once you set it up, you get direct deposit. The money goes in there every Friday. So the money would sit in there on Monday. Come Friday, they would disperse it. So the way I would explain it to the guys, your dad got a toolbox? And they're like, yeah. I said, does he throw all his tools in one drawer? No. I said, but if he asks you for a pair of pliers or screwdriver, oh yeah, he's got them all organized. Organize your bills, same way. Don't put everything in your checking. Because I would ask him, I said, well, how much do you have in your checking account? 200, 300. I haven't balanced my book yet. 200 or 300 extra. I said, well, I can tell you to the penny what I have in each of my account. I don't have to balance it because the bank does it for me. And
you don't pay anything extra for it.
No, nothing.
It's just a tool you learn how to use.
Right. So I had my coworker. I sent him in because he had just got divorced, and he said, Dan, I want to be honest with you, I don't even know how to balance the checkbook. But he was in college. He was taking college classes, and I'm like, I can help you. I can get you out of debt probably within a year. And he went in there with his budget sheet, and the girl says, we can't do that. We can't do this. I sent him to the same credit union that I went to. It's our GM credit union. He calls me and he said, Dan, they said they can't do it. I said, Mark, I'm already doing it. I already put everything down for you. Go back in there and tell her you want to talk to her supervisor. So she calls her, goes and gets her supervisor, talks to her, comes back. I apologize, Mark. I didn't even know we had these accounts that you could do this stuff. So I opened up their app basically on what you could do. And I sent more people in there. So I had another story where I was given breaks, and the young guy next to me had just hired in the plant. He was in his 20s. And he was telling his friend, man, I got a $700 check today or yesterday, and he lived at home. He says, I gave my parents $200 for living at home. He said, I still got $500 left. And I leaned over and I said, well, if that was me, I'd have more money in my pocket. He just looked at me, and I went around, gave breaks. Lunchtime comes around, and he taps me on the shoulder. I said, hey, Mike, what's up? He goes, well, Dan, what do you mean you have more money in your pocket? I said, well, hey, kudos to you. Most kids that live at home, or teens that live at home, don't pay their parents to live at home. I said, but you went about it all wrong. He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, it's the end of the month. Let's rewind 3 weeks ago. If you would have took $50 out of your check, second week another 50, third week another 50, you have 150 already. So now you get this check here that you just got. You got $700. Take another 50 out of that. You got your 200, and you have 650 in your pocket. He goes, wow, I never thought of it that way. I said, well, most adults pay everything in full. They get a bill, they pay the whole chunk. So like at the school, that's why we offer you 2 different dates, 1st or the 15th. Oh, I don't want the 1st, my mortgage, rent, car pay. I want the middle of the month, but that's why. It shouldn't matter if you're budgeting your money when it comes out,
Right.
You see? So then he tells me, well, Dan, I'm going to move out of my parents' house. I got a house picked out. I'm going to buy it. Can you do my budget? I'm like, you don't even have the house yet. But Dan had just bought his house, and I used his bills. What do you pay for electric? What do you pay for water? And then I told Mike, I said, if you were to buy a car, how much would you want to pay a month? Oh, I'm not going to buy a car. I'm going to drive this one till the wheels fall off. I said, I didn't ask you that. I said, if you were to buy a car, how much would you want to pay a month? He says, $300 a month. That's good. I said, so how much is that a week? Looks up in the sky. Looks up, and he's $75 a week. I said, can you afford $75 out of your check? He goes, yeah. I said, well, let's put that in the budget. So he had a vehicle account. I said, well, you know you're going to be getting engaged, getting married. I don't have a girlfriend right now. Well, guess what? He got engaged. He bought the house. The budget was close. I got pretty lucky on that. He was paying like $350 a week on his budget. And next thing you know, he got engaged. He wanted to buy a ring. And his vehicle account, he had like 10 grand in there just waiting to buy another car. And he used 6 grand to buy the engagement ring. But then he bought the new car later on after he got married. He said, Dan, if I would have not touched that vehicle account, I could have paid half my car off. I said, yeah, but you got the idea of saving your money for the future.
Right.
Yeah, you don't owe it.
He built that muscle.
Right. So to this day, he still calls me. And about 3 years ago, they went on strike at General Motors. I said, well, how did you do during the strike? He goes, I said, your wife's working too now, right? And he goes, no, they got 2 kids. And he says, Dan, we were off 6 weeks. So strike pay, you only get 200 and that's it. You go out in the picket line with your sign, you show up, $200, that's it. So he said the first week, everybody was grilling, barbecuing, like they were tailgating. Second week, we didn't go back to work. Third week, fourth week, fifth week. He says they were pretty scared, my coworkers, because they weren't getting a check. They didn't pay their bills. I said, well, how did you do? He goes, you remember how you told me about the 5th week? There's 5 weeks in a month, 4 times a year. Leave that money in there. So I did. He goes, I could have been off 6 months and not have a problem. So he's embraced that, and he was fine. He didn't stress out. He had the extra money in there. So my happy place is when somebody uses it and it works. But it's hard to help family members because they don't, oh, you're trying to control my money. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to help you build your credit.
Why do you think people take it that way? Maybe sometimes they take it in a way where it's not maybe our intention. Like the intention is maybe just to help, not to make you feel whatever way that makes you feel defensive about it. Why do you think people feel that way? Where do you think that comes from?
Well, I think it's because you open up to what you have and how you're doing. You might be driving a Cadillac, but you don't have a place to stay. You're just putting on the persona of you're doing well, and you're not. And that's my thing. Is I'm not going to give up on you because I've been there. I know what it's like. I know what it's when you call somebody and, oh, we can't do that. Hang up, call back. Hopefully you get somebody in a better mood. Oh, hey, Mr. Alvarez. Oh, yeah, I can do this for you. I can do that. Well, I called earlier. They couldn't do nothing. Same company, different person. What else can I do for you? See what I mean? You got to push the envelope. But it's hard because you're opening up your finances, and nobody wants to know that you can't write a check, balance a checkbook, but all you got to do is ask for help. And I've been through that, so there's always somebody out there that can help you, you know? So I don't know a lot of things, but I'll put you in touch with somebody that does that kind of stuff, so that helps. I had a guy at the school about a month ago. I was going in the back to get a uniform, and he was working out in the gym, and he said, hey, Mr. Alvarez, I hear you're the finance guy. And I'm like, no, I don't do like stocks and all that stuff. I just do like budgeting, simple. He goes, well, blah, 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 blah. We started having a conversation, but he opened up the door. I'm going to help you. And we're still in touch, talking, and doesn't matter how old you are or how young. It's just embrace the advice. So.
Yes. Before time keeps going, I really want to touch base on where you go to talk to yourself. And I know earlier you mentioned when on your way to GM, you had this talk within yourself, or this you kind of talk, you put your mind in the right mindset, I guess. Other than that, what other habits maybe, or what were your ways of connecting with yourself as far as like when it came to making tough decisions? I mean, you've had several moments where you've had to push the envelope, right?
Yeah.
So how do you how do you talk to yourself? How do you find peace when the world is noisy? How do you shut it all out?
That's a good question because each day is different, and you gotta look at it as a challenge each day. Some days are going to be good, some aren't. It's going to be cloudy, sun's going to be out, it's going to rain. I mean, you just take everything, what you can do within your means, I guess.
Mhm.
And my thing is, I don't want to go backwards, so I have to change my mindset. And I've learned a lot from my son on what he reads, and he has his coffee with Coach, and I'll listen in, and there's always room for growth. And
Mhm.
um, and that's, you just have to have an open mindset. And I'm still working on it. So I mean, nobody's perfect, but I'm always trying to share what I know because somebody shared it with me. My tax guy, my wife didn't want to go do our taxes. Shouldn't take you more than an hour do your tax. I was there 3 hours because he was giving me all this information.
Mm.
Who's going to give you free information? And all you got to do is take the time. That's all I had to do. So she didn't want to go anymore. Oh, you sit there and talk with Vic, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, but I'm learning what I need to do.
I look up to that. I look up to the fact that uh, you keep wanting to learn, um, up like even till today, and the fact that you say like I'm still learning. You're still
Mm.
like I feel like that's so genuine of you, and because it's true. It's true, like we're always learning, and the reason is because the world is constantly
Change.
changing, right? So and like it or not, it doesn't matter, if you work from home and maybe don't see the light out much at all, it's still the outer world still
Yeah.
affects you.
Yeah. You only have control of what you can control. I mean, you can hear things and see things, but in your space, like at GM, you, uh, um, you can only control what's in front of you that's there. You can't worry about outside things, you know. And you know, my grandkids that stayed with me, I always told them they had to pay rent. Well, I got to pay rent. I'm like, yeah, I don't need your money. It's the principle of the thing. Going
Mm,
back to the,
it's a principle.
yeah, that's the life stories. Well, if you have 4 apples, take them to your friend. You only have one, and you're going to eat in front of them. That's rude. You know, my dad coming back to me, and with my grandkids, you're going to pay rent. And when my daughter stayed at our house, she had moved out, and her and her husband came back. And my wife says, "Oh, they need help. They got to come." I told them they can come live with us. And I'm like, "You did what? They're going to come stay with us?" And I'm like, oh, "Okay, how am I going to face this one?" So, long story short, my wife had a coworker. They lived with their parents. All the kids lived with the parents. None of them paid rent. And her coworker, when she worked at the Parks Mall, um, she would just go shopping. And she goes, "Boy, girl, you're always shopping." And like, you got money for all that? Don't you pay rent at your in-laws? And they're like, no, nobody does. So then she says, my daughter they're going to come stay with us, my son-in-law. I said, no, they're not just going to go shopping every day and not pay rent. That was my mindset.
Hmm.
So I said, look, I sat them down and I said, what are you guys paying for rent? And this was 15 years ago. And they were paying $500 a month. Wasn't a good area. I said, can you afford 600? And they said, yeah. I said, okay, this is the agreement. Stay here as long as you want. I'm going to charge you 600 a month. I'll put 500 away every month. I'll keep 100 for the utilities and stay here a year. And then when you guys move, that'll be your down payment for a house. Well, my son-in-law, I can save the money. I'll put it away. I said, no, it has to be to me first of the month. Don't be late. I'm going to charge you $50 late fee if you're late. It's the principle of things.
Right.
And they stayed there for the year, came around. Of course, my wife's complaining about, you got extra family living there, water, electricity. So I said, okay, you guys fulfilled your agreement. We're going to keep it at 600. I said, I'm going to keep four for utilities because our bills have gone up, and I'll put 200 away for you the next few months that you stay here. They stayed an extra 5 months. And I think they walked out of the house with like 7,000 to put towards a house. But I wasn't going to just let them move in and go out to eat, go shop. I don't know if that was going to happen, but I wasn't going to let it happen because of what my wife told me about her coworker.
Right.
So I had to have a blueprint to do.
You know, you are so smart, and I'll tell you why I say that specifically.
Well, let me stop you right there because I was the bad guy because of what I was doing to help them. They didn't see that. You see that? And that's hard because I have to bite the bullet because
Mm,
why are you
that's even harder.
yes, and I have to sleep at night knowing that I've got to stay on course, and that's me. But I'm not. That's just my parents would do that to me. They're not going to let you skate by.
Mm.
And to me, that's old school, but it worked for me. It's going to work for my kids, going to work for my grandkids. So that's
Yeah, well, you know, those are principles. They're not just ideas or opinions or feelings. These are like principles. You know, like they come. There are reasons for these. That obviously you saw the reasons, you learned the reasons, which is why you're passing it down. And I'll
mm,
tell you why I say you're so smart. You mentioned you saw you remembered her friend saying like the people living there rent free were just had extra money to spare, and well, without going too deep into that, I think one of the lessons, not only just the lesson to for them to budget, but more so to appreciate what they have. But anyways, going to there, there's I read once there's like three types of um I guess not lessons, but there's three types of people, basically. You can categorize in smart
mm,
to not as smart, right? The first type is, or it doesn't matter the order really, but going from one to the other is you see something or you read something, you learn from somebody else's mistakes. You see that, you learn that, you don't do it anymore. That means, in some sense, you gained time because somebody else already kind of paid for that lesson. Like that lesson was
right,
given, somebody else paid for it. It's up to you if you want to kind of take it and run with it, right? You kind of skip that. You, in a sense, you move faster. Then it's the other one, the other tier, which is um, you see something, you learn something, somebody else tells you something, and you're like, that's not going to happen to me.
right.
Like, I got to test this out
Uh,
for myself. Like, that happened to them. It won't happen to me. Right. And then maybe they go down the journey and they find out, okay, maybe that and more. And then there's the third tier that it's you see it, you hear it, you read it, whatever the case is, you do it, you like you don't get the results and you keep doing it again. You keep doing it again, you keep doing it again, right? It's kind of like this the one that just kind of like the rat
right.
race, right? You just kind of going around in circles. The second one's like, oh no, I gotta do it. The third one's like, oh, I see what they learned. I'm not gonna do that. And then they go on and move on to the
Right.
next step, essentially. Um, and so as you're speaking, that reminds me of that because you've been watching, you've been learning, and you're like, okay, well, I see where that road leads me to. I'm going to take this other path. I may not know where it goes, but it might be better than that one.
And that being said, my dad, the way he would explain it to us or to me, there's two roads. There's the narrow road and the wide road. The wide road is the easiest road to take. The narrow road, that's the hardest one to take. You want the easy way out or the hard way. And most people take the shortcut and do that. But I've been been there, like you're saying. So I try to stay focused more on what I need to do, not what the easiest way, because then I feel good at the end of the day. It's like your job. You go in there, you do the best you can, you feel good. Other things might have not gone right, but you can walk out of there with your pride, your head held up, and like, I did my job today. I don't care what anybody says, you know? And you have to have that mindset to where you're focused. But then again, it goes to back to what my brothers are always, oh, man, you're always so serious. You take everything so serious. And I'm like, I had to put myself in that mindset the way I grew up. I put that on myself. I don't blame anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I made the choice. I moved out. Nobody put me out. So you embrace it, you work with it, and it's not always going to be easy. But if you keep working at it, something's got to give. So that's the way I see it, you know.
Yeah.
But you're right. There's different ways of seeing that, and I hate that all these years. Dad's so serious. Why can't we just have fun? Why can't I just make a mistake? He's got to like tell me, you know, sit me down and do this and do that. You know, my daughter had bought her. I spoiled her. I bought her a new car when she was in high school, but for her fight to get here, and just her, not that she was an all A student, but she went to school, didn't give me a hard time. I had my reasons for that, but one day she had filled up her car. And back in Michigan, I had a long driveway, so you could put like 6 cars there. My car was by the garage door. My wife says, "Hey, I need you to go to the grocery store. I need you to get blah, blah, blah." And my daughter had just pulled up and I said, "Crystal, let me borrow your keys." She goes, "For what?" I said, "Well, your mom wants me to go to the store and I'm blocked in, so I'm going to take your car." "Oh, Dad, I just filled it up." And I said, "What?" She goes, "Well, you know, I just filled it up." I'm like, "Come here, have a seat." "Dad, another talk." I said, "Look, I'm good enough to make the payment, but I'm not good enough to drive the car. Even you should have said, 'Hey, Dad, it's full of gas. Here's the keys. Knock yourself out.'" And of course, she was like 18 at the time, 17. And now she has a different mindset because she's, "I always have your voice back here. Dad, do this, do this, do that." Well, I have my dad talking to me. And I'm glad that you have that voice because I did something right.
It's kept him out of trouble.
Right. Yeah. So she gets it now. But there's always a story. I'm not going to, "Oh, really? You don't want me to use your car and scream and holler at you?" No, I'm going to break it down for you. And that was my thing. So I didn't like it, but I got it. You don't like it, but I'm going to break it down for you.
It's kind of like one of those things that you just kind of see you may not see the benefits of it in the moment, but down the line you will. Like we all do at some points, right? Like even myself, I think about things in the past. I'm like, "Oh, okay, well that makes sense now." Right. Yeah. Wow. So man, it's been such a great conversation. I think we've been going this for a little bit over 3 hours.
Oh, wow. I break the record? No?
No, but we easily could. It's 3:15 is the record.
But you got me pouring out.
But I'm not done.
Okay.
I'm not done because I did want to ask you. Well, okay, and honestly, yeah, I did make you do what? Sorry.
Oh,
actually, I want to save it to the end.
Well, you have me pouring out all these inner feelings that I do talk about them, but it's hard to like face to face for this long to like, "Oh, wow, you're telling me your whole life story," but it's a journey of that. I wouldn't change it because I've learned so much along the way. I might have not learned that if it would have been different, you know? So for me, it's just, that's deep for me. It speaks volumes to the point of my brothers didn't do what I had to go through. So why am I plucked out of this group of brothers with your journey, you know? So that's the thing is, and I'm grateful for that. I'm blessed because it helped me raise my family. And like I tell my son, Dan, he always talks about General Motors now, but like my mindset for him is gave you a good life, support your family, you, your daughter, your wife. It got you here to Texas, and you took a different journey, and I'm part of that journey, but never like, I have a lot of negative stuff about GM, but I don't want to go there. I want to think about the positive things that it's done for me. Put food on the table, kept the lights on, and that's where it is for me. That's the only way I can see it. And
Well, you know, there is a really good saying that you cannot see the light if you haven't seen the dark. Um, and then it just decides what you want to look at. And I love everything about it because you've seen the dark, you know it's there. Um, you've seen the light, and you choose to push the light and promote it, right? Like the good things,
right,
like General Motors, right? There's a lot of negatives, but I mean, the benefits are just the benefits, or what it's how it's impacted your life. It's so much more meaningful than that. The other part is even almost
yeah,
irrelevant because so much great has came out of that.
yeah. I was telling the story. I think it was to Diego when I got in the General Motors. We just hired. Just hired in, and all the guys after they'd been there a couple months, all bought new cars, and we were in a little group standing around. What'd you get? Oh, I got a Chrysler LeBaron. What'd you get? Oh, I got this car. I got this car. Alvarez, what'd you buy? 74 Impala. 74 Impala, that's a family car. Dude, you're 20 years old. What are you doing getting? I mean, yeah, I had my son at the time. I said, yeah. I said, but I did buy a house. And I didn't know what else to come back with. They're all bought brand new cars. And I said, I bought a house. And they're like, what? Yeah. I said, well, to me, you can't live in a car, but I can live in my house. That's all. I mean, I didn't have a comeback. That's all I had. So the
So
group
good.
broke up, and then the guy comes up to me after. He had like 4 kids at the time.
Mm.
He said, Dan, you bought a house? I said, yeah, it ain't much, but it's mine. He goes, what? Can you show me like what to do? You know, like get a house? Because I'm renting right now. I got 4 kids and blah, blah, blah. But he went out and bought this big marquee car. As big as one you can get.
I know which ones, the ones that look like a boat,
Yeah,
boat cars.
yeah. And you know, how you think I felt? Well, you got a family car? Really? You got? But when I mentioned the house, my little $8,300 house, it was like, man, that was like a mansion to them. It was like, well, we got cars. We don't have. We're renting. You know. So that's the only way I could take it.
Gosh,
So
man,
yeah,
it's so good. I'm so lucky to be able to be here and talk to you today, and like many people, honestly. But this these conversations just light me up because I I I I know like there's so much goodness, like you just bring up so much inspiration, and it's so good to talk to you, and I'm so grateful you even agreed to sit here and share your story because it's not easy.
no,
You know you're sitting here knowing like this is recorded, this is gonna go live on the internet, and you sit here and opened so much, and I just want you to know that I am so grateful for that, and I appreciate it so much, and I am so touched.
well, I thank you for letting me open up my life because it was like the priest when we had our 25th anniversary. Dan, you got this cloud over you, let it go. But now I get to express it. And, you know, you can hear a lot of hurt in this journey, but it's for a reason that we go through. It's not a perfect life. If everything was perfect, I mean, life would be great. And, but
I don't think life would be great because I don't think people would know that life is great.
yeah, unless you go through it.
Right.
Yeah. And my dad always told me, he says, treat Irene like a queen. Treat her this way. Treat her, because he's lost 2 wives, my dad.
Mm.
And he's like, you don't know until, you know, the saying, you don't know what you have until you lose it. And I don't want to have to be in that position I don't want to know what I lost until she's gone.
Mhm.
So I'm like, I'm going to treat her special every day. And yeah, take my man card from me because that's me. That's not going to happen because I've only been with her all these years. And if I don't do it and the next guy comes around, if he doesn't raise the bar, then shame on him. I'm not going to be around. I told her I'd be like the ghost. What was the name of that movie? But yeah, that's my thing.
Yeah.
Is I got to treat her. And she always tells me, there's a song, Kiss an Angel Good Morning. And treat her blah, 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 this way, that way. But when I bring her coffee in the morning, I always give her a kiss in the morning. And sometimes I forget and she'll say, hey, I didn't get my kiss. Because you just never know what the next day is going to bring. So there's that song with Garth Brooks, If Tomorrow Never Comes. If you never heard it, play it, and it makes you think. If you say this is your soulmate, then treat it that way. Treat this person like no other. And that's me, So I always tell her, why do you treat her this way? I said, well, I have a lot of girlfriends. I only have one wife, so I got to treat her special, So that's me.
Oh, gosh, that is gold. That is gold. And I think, I don't want to go really on a rant with this, but I think if people hear your advice and follow it, it just sounds like that would lead to a better life, in the sense of like, life is already hard, right? Like you mentioned it, like there's things you can't control that you just have to kind of deal with. And having that mindset of just embracing and giving your best, because one of the first things we talked about today was like, okay, well, what did you do to learn her love language? And you're like, well, I'm just doing what like the best.
Right.
You're just being the best version of yourself.
There you go. And it has to be a two-way street. You can't just cherish somebody with all kind of love and you're not getting that back. It has to be both. And that's the thing. We have that. And again, we have our arguments. We're not perfect, but the thing is, the next day is a new day, and we try to correct what we talked about the day before. And it might take a few days, but we're not going to stay on that. Turn the page, basically. So
Move on.
Move on.
Leave it in the past. Take the lesson and run with it. Okay. One last thing I want to ask you before the podcast is over is, I want to know, just like everybody else's, I want to know your own personal definition of happiness or joyfulness.
I'd say being with my family. It's you mentioned earlier you don't want to be by yourself, and I'm a hard person. Of you gotta charge me rent. You got rules. You gotta do this. If I borrow your car, I can't eat inside it. I gotta keep it clean. Yes, but that's me. But I do love my family. They know that, and I do anything for them. I've helped some purchase cars. I've helped with, budgeting their money, a little bit of everything. And I just want them to know that my thing is I do love my family, but I only know one way to do that, and that's to be the person that I am. And my wife is the way she is with the family. And we're in agreement with how we do things. So, and it's not always like, oh, grandpa's this and grandpa's that. That's just me. I can't change my path because everybody has a different path on how you got to where you are. And I'm going to keep on my path and not try to be weak, but not try to be overpowering. It's just, I'm going to get my story across, my, what's the word? A reason for what you're doing. And that's me, because like my dad, he's not a war hero. He's not some famous music. He's nothing famous, but he's my dad. He's my mentor, and he still puts me in check, but he puts it in a different way. Because long story short, when my daughter moved out, I was angry, and I was driving, and he says, "Mijo, why are you so upset? She's been very obedient. She's always done what you ask." But he could easily said, "Well, you moved out at 16. You did this." He didn't go there, but in a nice way, he checked me, and I'm like, "Why didn't he go there?" And I'm thinking, he didn't have to. I get it.
Mm.
And that's when my daughter and them moved in, and so.
Wow.
But yeah, you see, I'm like, he had his chance to get his punches on me, and he didn't go
Right.
there, but he put it in a different perspective. So I try not to be.
It's like a double lesson right there.
Yes, yeah, and I'm always getting the lesson. There's always a lesson somewhere. It's
Mm-hmm.
like you guys. You guys are on the mat. Oh, I got put in an armbar. Well, how do I get out of it? If I keep doing the same thing, I got to figure out a
Right.
technique how to do it. So it's the same thing through life. And it's always whatever you're good at, always be good at everything you do the best you can. You might not like you might be good in math. I might be good in English. You don't like English, but you're going to try your best to get through and get a decent grade. But if you just like, I don't like it, I'm going to get an E, you can't take that way, that mindset. You try to be good at everything you do to get through it.
And I think it falls back to what you said. It's like you just always do the best thing you can do. That's I'm gonna take that principle and run with it. I mean, I think it's like I've thought about that already, right? Um, but this even enhances it because it's like this is literally you've lived by this principle. It sounds like through most if not maybe all of your life. And hey, look, I look up to you as a person. I love your personality. I love
Thank you.
your energy. Yeah, and talking to you, and even talking to you today, it enhances that even more, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
And it makes sense too.
But
I admire you. I admire you for even like maybe society has certain views and may put you in certain category, and you're like, well, this is who I am,
right.
and I think that is courage.
Well, you gave me a chance to express myself, and again, I'm, I've learned to be a people person like my wife. She's a people person. She talks to everybody, and I had to, I would always check you out. But now I've opened up being at school. I try to talk to everybody. And you got me to do that today because it's telling your good and the bad stories, what you've been through. And that some people might, oh, man, he's been through a lot. He's been this, or maybe he's not happy. And no, I am. I am because I made choices. I try to correct things. Again, going back to my wife having her 25th anniversary, biggest thing I could have ever did for her was give her that wedding that we didn't have and have my family in it. So, I mean, but sometimes you don't have a chance to correct the wrongs you've done. And I've been able to go back and change some things and not the way they should have been, but the best I could. And that's the thing. And, you have a daughter now. She's going to learn from both of yous, and she's going to feed off of whatever you're going to show her. And all you can do is plant the seed and see how she grows. And that's how I've been able to do. I can see good things with all my kids, and they're all doing well. And of course, they'll get in a group text and they'll talk about dad did this, dad did that. I'm like, okay, I'm good with that. Mention that at my funeral because that's me. I'm the life of the not life of the party, but life of the jokes. They'll talk about things that I've done. So I get that. So,
I love
it's a
it.
good thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for being here and sharing your story, your thoughts, your lessons, your wisdom. Truly grateful and will always be grateful.
Oh, thank you for inviting me today.